Hello, welcome. Welcome to today's stream. We will be reading momentarily. Specifically, we'll be reading more NoSleep stories, but we have some dono goals to get through. I can't remember my own commands. So, Diablo sauce, yes. Okay, so we've made the $100 goal, which is... I've tweeted something on my Twitter, this was quite some time back. 150 hot sauce shot, so I'm just gonna do a packet of hot sauce because I don't have a shot glass readily available. And $200, there is an art raffle currently going on my Twitter. We're actually very close to getting the $300, which is a community movie night. We're like $30 short currently, but that should be soon to change because I'm working on a commission currently. Just waiting for the payment to go through. Yay! So anyway, hot sauce. I just had dinner, so this would be my my finishing up dinner, and then I'll be making the various corresponding paper stars because as you can tell, there are many here from various subscriptions and commissions and such. So this is a fresh, unused hot sauce packet. I'm not cheating. This has been sitting in my fridge for since whenever I last had Taco Bell, which is recent. So, without further ado, nope, that's Diablo sauce. All right, 3, 2, 1. God, by itself it tastes like shit. It tastes so good in other things though. Alright. It's spacey. But completely flattened packet. Oh, that's so funny. OBS shat itself right as I did that. Very cool. We shall reconnect shortly, but completely emptied. Hopefully we're back. Hopefully, maybe, possibly. Anyway, completely empty packet that has been slurped. Let's see any like little remaining bit. Oh, hardly any. Hot sauce shot completed, done. Into the little trash bin it goes. Oh, I feel a burp. Oh no. Hello, camera? What doing? What happened? No? Okay. We're stuck apparently. Oh, I'm so sorry, that was disgusting. Alright, we're having some technical issues. Very cool. We're just gonna throw myself over here, and then... poof! I'm just gonna figure out what the fuck happened here. But, speaking from the void, how's everyone today? How's everyone's day going? Hopefully it's been going well. Today was a good day for you. As my Tibby, hi. Hi Tibby. Feed the kitty. Oh, you just missed me having hot sauce. And a water, wowee. What is happening here? Hi! Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. I'm speaking from the void. You know what? We're gonna go back. Because at least you get to see something here. Hi, hello. Don't mind that. Thinking, it's going. Maybe, possibly. Let's scoot that over. Okay, that looks like I'm real again. Hi, hello. Thank you for water, thank you for feed. That is the water, thank you. As for feed, I have my leftover dinner, so I will be taking a little bite of that. Thank you. Now we have stars to fold. So before we do any reading tonight, we're going to go fold all these paper stars. We already have a nice little collection so far from various kind souls that have commissioned me or have donated to my cause. Now we have a few other kind souls that I've been meaning to fold paper stars for. And hopefully you guys can see this. But as I was saying earlier, we're nearly at our 300 dono goal, which is very exciting and very I'm very grateful for it, because the amount that I've gotten so far from various kind souls is greatly helping me pay off my medical debt. And it really is a huge weight off of my shoulders to have friends and even strangers online be so compassionate and caring enough to even give me, you know, a couple bucks here and there through like subs or commissions. And it's really lovely. Very appreciated. Yeah. Pretty sure that's a TV show from I don't even know when, but it's quite the old TV show. But we have one additional. Oh my god, you can't even see that. Too fucking pale for this. There we go, one star. One singular star out of so many that will be made. I did primarily pick colors that we hadn't seen a lot of for these new stars. We have a lot of blue ones already, so I wanted to go for like pink and purple and yellow, because we haven't had a lot of those yet. But yeah, so thank you again, all of you that have been so kind and courteous to donate to my little bit of cause that is slowly being paid off. I'm trying to make sure that my hands stay in camera frame. That's 2. And now, since we're also so close to the $300 mark, I'm trying to figure out what movie or show series to watch with everyone in Discord. I'm thinking either something really like cute and like something that everyone would enjoy, or some sort of horror movie. Like nothing like super scary. So I don't want people to feel like they can't join if it's too scary. Maybe something like Coraline, where it's like a little creepy and not necessarily like too bad. Or even the fucking, what's it called? The Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I think that's just what it's called, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. So I've seen it. It's pretty goofy. Not, like, super scary. But it's entertaining, and it's cute, and it had good story lore. Fweddy. But I'll probably make like a poll in my Discord once we hit that 300 mark. Or, alternatively, if you guys have any ideas, I am all ears. I am just very picky with shows and movies, unfortunately, but I will write it out for my lovely, generous community. Gojira 56, hello, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Hope you're doing well. We are taking a little breather before we start doing some spooky story reading tonight by folding paper stars. I hope you've been having a good day today. Watch M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong's Avatar movie? Oh god. Oh no. Do I have to? I realize I pulled like a lot of pink. Like a lot of pink. What ones do we not really have? We don't have like any purple. Like at. Oops, sorry. Don't have any purple. We don't have any green. So we're gonna do a couple purple. I don't know. Well, we got some green in there, but that's okay. We'll do a couple like minty greens. So that'd be what, 4? We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then these can be saved for another time. Close enough. You don't, but like we can all suffer together. Oh no. Why do you want to make Discord chat suffer? We could like movie marathon it. We could watch like all of the Lord of the Rings movie in one sitting. See who the real the real troopers are. I am not a good bun. That is true. You're a great bun. Only this is the director's cut. Oh no. Hi, Roy. You want to watch in the suffering for the Lord of the Rings? Why are you smooshing? Why are you smooshing in the chat? Also, for anyone that would like to add to the paper stars, $10. And it gets us one step closer to our $300 goal to get a community movie night. And you get to pick what color star that you'd like. Lord of the Rings script reading would be crazy. Oh my god, my voice. My voice would be so shot by like halfway through the first movie, I'm pretty sure. That has to be like a huge fucking like manual of a script, like one full novel script. Come here. Come on. Oh, also in like happy-ish news, I have, you can probably tell, my nails are done. I did them myself because I'm a broke bitch, and also that it was a horrible time trying to get the old nails that I had removed, and I didn't want to spend more money to get them done again, so I did them myself. I'm quite proud of how they came out as the first time in a long time of doing my nails. You might also be wondering, Lucy, why is your other thumb like not done? Medical reasons is why that boils down to. They look great, thank you! I try very hard. Soleil! Hearts in the chat if you like my nails. What way? That way. Oh, so many hearts. But yeah. I'm glad you all could come and hang out for a little while. Oh yeah, some of these papers, I don't know which ones specifically, but some of these papers glow in the dark. I have no idea which ones they are. I do know it's a lot of the paler ones, so like the one that I currently have. Like the mint green, some of the yellows. A lot of the paler ones are the ones that I think are glow in the dark. Could be wrong. Ah. Please hold some structure. Little star, please. There we go. I don't know what else to talk about. That's why I haven't done a hand cam stream in a while, because I have no idea what to talk about. I guess work has been okay. Nothing exciting on that front. That's my favorite Bakotel order. Ooh. Currently, I've always liked the potato soft tacos when they introduced those, because they have like a potato, I think it's like a gordita or something similar, like a potato burrito. So I like their potato things. I like their nacho fries. There is, I never remember what it's called, but like I'll recognize it if I see it. Burrito that has like little fiesta strips in it, and rice and ground beef and cheese, all the good Bakotel things. Or if it's not the burrito, then it'd be a steak quesadilla. I miss the grilled stuffed burrito. Oh yeah, the grilled cheese burrito is also pretty good, but like it sits like a fucking rock. It's so heavy, but it's so good. As for like a go-to order, I think it just depends what I'm wanting, but more often than not, I'll get like a couple tacos and then either a burrito or a quesadilla, and that'll kind of hold me over for like the whole day. Also, the Doritos tacos are decent. The Doritos Locos tacos. I'll get those sometimes if I have a very specific craving for them. I did try the Cheez-It collab, the tostada Cheez-It, where it's a gigantic Cheez-It that's like this big, legitimately, like it's huge. And it's a giant Cheez-It. It tastes literally like a gigantic Cheez-It. That's all that it is. Grilled cheese burrito is so good. It is. What's the volcano menu? I don't remember that. But that sounds like something that I would be a part of. So I assume it's like the spicy variant of like regular menu items. If back in my day they made red shell tacos and spicy nacho cheese sauce and everything. Oh, okay, okay. Back in my day, 1947, right before the war started. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. You're not that old. That sounds good though. I do like me some spicy, as I just ate a Diablo hot sauce packet that I'm not about to fish out of my fucking trash. I am. No, you're not. Not that old. I used to drink ketchup? Oh my god. Like drink like just straight out the bottle, or would you like dilute it? Also, why? Why would you drink ketchup? Yeah? Oh my god. Straight out. Oh my god. Tibby. Tibby, why would you do that? Just had some fire tapatio Doritos. Ooh. Oh, I keep seeing those. Are they any good? 'Cause I've had the flamin' hot nacho cheese ones and those were okay. Yeah, Tibby, please enlighten us. It's funny and also ketchup tastes good. I personally think that ketchup is too sweet, so I don't really like it too much. But my brother, my actual biological brother, whom none of you will ever see, ever, he's a little older than I am. And when we were children, he would eat ketchup on literally everything, like actually everything. He would put ketchup on pizza, he would put ketchup on like carrots and fruit and grapes, and then like on standard things too, like burgers, hot dogs, chicken, whatever. Oh, apparently OBS didn't like me talking about my real life. Anyway, he's an adult now. He has stopped doing that. However, he will still douse a lot of things in ketchup when sort of given the appropriate opportunity. Thanks, OBS. Thank you for reconnecting. You guys missed the wonderful story. For anyone watching the VOD, you'll be fine. Anyone currently in stream, you missed the story of me saying that my brother used to douse everything in ketchup, and he no longer does it. My struggle meal is salt on rice. I feel that. My struggle meal, it depends, and it also depends what I have on, you know, in the house. Excuse me, house at the time. Yeah, hi, thanks obvious. Would either be something with rice, just like rice and like a sauce of some sort, Or, and my father has instilled this in me, the beautiful, wonderful combination of crackers, cheese, and pickle slices. It is delicious, especially if you like all three of those things. So my father would make a snack of some Triscuits, whatever block of cheese, which was usually like cheddar or like a stronger cheese, and dill pickles cut into like coins or like little rounds. Like, sorry, that wasn't meant to like gotcha. That was like rounded pickles, and then you just kind of eat them stacked on top of each other, and it was quite nice actually. But anytime I tell people this, they look at me like I have gained another limb suddenly, and it's not that weird. At least I don't think it's that weird. My struggle meal is Roy's salt on rice. I mean, that is a staple. I also partake in that occasionally. Why is this not wanting to cooperate? Please go inside. Please fold in. What if we do it this way? The one final star does not want to be final and completed. Please, 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 get in there. I blame my father for some of my strange food habits and some of my family's strange food habits. No, his food? Oh, specifically Roy's bowl of salted rice. Oh, I see. I gotcha. Salt brought to you by League of Legends. Play today. Mold and salt your rice at the same time. There we go. Final star. Yay! There's so many stars in here now. It covers all the bottom of the little cup here. Wow, we have so many lovely colors. So many kind people. Now we. I think we read that differently. What do you mean? What do you mean we read that differently? Like, the salt was provided by League of Legends? Or like, the League of Salt? Like, the people that make the salt? Oh, like, your salt on his rice. Oh, I read that as your bowl of salted rice. Is that... It's more or less the same thing, though, because then you'll just get salty that he took your bowl of rice. Right? No? Okay, maybe not. Whatever. Anyway, we're gonna go read. Where is... There it is. Ah! There I am. Hi. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. I'm still here. Oh yes, please. Thank you. Like, watching, like, live time of my fucking, like, connection on OBS. Shit itself. Anyway, hi. Hello. We're going to be reading some stories today. We're gonna move this over here so that I can see everybody. That is... There we go. Excellent, good. Alright, so we got a couple stories here. I've read like the first paragraph or so of each. Like first line or first paragraph, kind of depending on how long it is. But we got 3 stories, all from the Reddit forum NoSleep. Some of our favorite stories have been from here, so a lot of people seem to like when I do these, so we're gonna continue with it until for some reason I get in trouble for it. The first one we have, these are all relatively long titles, so I apologize. First one is, my wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. The next one, or another one, is the previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide I'm not sure I want to live here anymore. And then the last one would be, I met someone who claimed to be the devil, and I think I believe them. Why the sad face? What's wrong? What's wrong? Why the sad face? What happened? Alright, so I am going to throw a poll of which one to read first. Not forced, first. Alright, I'm gonna leave that for 2 minutes. Maybe I'm happy I don't have a wife. Oh no. Go ahead and vote. I left it for a couple minutes so people have time. Excuse me, we'll start reading whatever one has the most votes. Must be nice. Oh no. I'm telling her. Oh, the drama. Go ahead and please vote. This is to Roy's wife. Attention, Roy's wife. He says he's upset to be your husband. No need. She's picking around the corners and stuff. Oh no. Got like 30 seconds left on the vote. Sorry for anyone that was very loud. Sorry, headphone users. We're just gonna turn that music down a little bit. Alright, where are we sitting at on votes? One whole vote. One singular vote. Very cool. Thank you guys. Gave you 2 whole minutes to settle that. Amazing. Awesome. We're reading My Wife Hides first, apparently. Thank you guys. Alright. Let's get zoomed in here so that I can fucking read. So proud of you guys. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. My bad, My Wife Hides for sure. I was away, I'm sorry. Tisk. How could you? I needed you right then and there for those 2 minutes and I have been betrayed. How dare. Alright. Oh, hi. Sorry, one moment. Hi, Kit. Thank you for the blep. And thank you for water. Wow. You came in just in time. Water and feed? Oh my goodness, Kit. Just redeeming all the things. Get to my little bit of dinner. That's my feed. Alright, first story, number 1. My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. My wife, Lynn, and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. I have to take care of baby Oki. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea. And that's fine. But that's what's so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the past 6 years we've been together, I think I've seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to the Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door when I happened to notice Lynn peeking out at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Jeez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee off from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. "Hi! Welcome, Orion." I can't read. "Hi, Orion. Welcome." I combined your full username. Random. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It was really weird and just totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing in the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like a Cheshire cat. I screamed, I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tiled floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was laying on her side asleep. Or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to make sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again. From over there," I said, pointing to a spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was in there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just thought that she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching me from the corner or behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. Crazy? But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to her friends, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain. Her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with this crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. "What the fuck, Lynn?" I snapped. "This shit is getting really fucking annoying." I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. "Lynn?" I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. "I swear to God, just fucking stop it," I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. But there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared. too afraid to open the damn door in my face and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend that night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top of the step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers, and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door, as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still as wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I had ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house and about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Then I called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I had left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she had been there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill so that I was able to rest a little bit. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she would never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when a familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while. Possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt in that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home! I shouted, now! She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs. As if Lynn could hear them from her place outside, her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried to explain to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and I turned off my cell. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her. That no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to go and confront her. Give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. And more of the same. All texts telling me that she loved me, she wanted me home, how worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from the situation. But if you saw the way Lynn looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, and then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. I can't read, sorry. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon. And thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry, because it's not my place. But is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I'd been dealing with. People change. But she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said. Ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait. What do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no, just to let you sleep. She said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No. She looked awful though. Like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I need to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even. Like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband, I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person, and wasn't really easy to get along with. She had hardly ever smiled when she did, only her lips would move into a thin lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offense. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want to feel uncomfortable. She didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away, so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to do. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something, and I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling. What is it that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingers impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you ever noticed any odd behavior, or possibly any mental health issues? I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was thinking or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured, as her mother, you would be as well, I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest that you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me, she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn, I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath, as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together, but failing. Marianne, what's wrong? I started. Look, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she had hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she try to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I'd missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help, she'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I couldn't have just been grasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she said that, as if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Hi, YouTube. Chris didn't think that we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to it, but I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When I pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets, like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with a stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. What do you guys use to clean the floors around here? Shit? Chris mumbled. Shut up, I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite it being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. Why the fuck are you looking under the couch? Chris asked eventually. Aren't we looking for your wife? He was looking at me like I was a moron. Just go upstairs, I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall alongside the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We'd taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps to check the spare bedroom, and it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I had left. I don't think she's here. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something, Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and the smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she had collected from small animals and wondered how she had gotten them, and shuddered at the thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. But fucking hell, your wife's in here collecting eyeballs? Chris said, gagging. I think we should go, he called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. Alright. I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of fresh air. I could taste the rot on my tongue, and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines eyeballs in their closet like that? Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help, I said. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist, he said. You coming or what? Can't stand the smell of any... His words dried in his throat, and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us, with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She had her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she had been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving, to say the least. Wide eyes, and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This is my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I'd taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better, and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state that she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder, and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing in from in between her fingers. "Oh my god, Lynn, you're bleeding," I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. "Are you alright in there?" Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris, the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down towards the hall, afraid to take my eyes off of her. Are you bleeding?" Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. "Chris, run, go!" I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. "Jesus, Lynn," Chris said. You, playing hide and seek?" I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I said as quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard, talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word. I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched in the rearview mirror. Sure, I'd see her there, running after us. But she never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of these things would matter. Somehow, I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the past 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her to the help that she desperately needs. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "I found you." And a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There's no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, but I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. That is the end of our first story. My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying by Malia Girl 1314. It was rated Scariest Story in 2022, so very good job, author. Definitely was a little weird for a minute, but it very quickly got more and more terrifying. We're gonna take a very quick water break. Well, what is everyone's thoughts on our first story? If anyone is still around and not shitting their pants. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed. Actually, real question. Yeah, okay. Alright. Next one. I don't really know how long some of these are, but got two more. Next one is the previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide. I'm not sure I want to live here anymore, and this is by newtotownJAM. Is voted most immersive story of 2020. I moved in with my boyfriend yesterday. We've been together for 5 years now, and we're old and wise enough to settle down and finally leave our parents' houses. He just turned 24 and I'm 22. He's the love of my life. His name is Jamie, and I couldn't be happier to be living with him. When we decided to make the leap, we spent 2 months looking at flats and houses. We couldn't afford to buy yet, so renting was our only option, but the prices were astronomical. For our budget, we would have been lucky to get a box room and a stove. Jamie works for a local 24-hour fast food restaurant, and I'm training to be a teacher. The early stages of training don't pay much, and I owe a lot in student loans, so finances are tough. We had almost given up hope until we found our flat. It was nothing special, but to us, it was a palace. A spacious 2-bedroom apartment with views of a city park, a balcony, and local conveniences. It was in a tower block in a not-so-nice area, but neither of us had been wealthy growing up. We weren't fussy, just grateful to be together. The advert was sweetened by the deposit-free option and open-ended tenancy. The landlord was happy to sign a 5-year contract if we wanted. That sort of thing never happens in the city. We were told that along with no deposit, we would also have no inspections, but would be liable to pay for any damage when we ended the tenancy. I'd never heard of anything quite like that. We knew that for our budget and location, we weren't going to get any better. We snapped the place up fast, not even bothering to view it. It felt like our only chance. Move-in day rolled around quickly, and yesterday we got the keys to our first home together. It was such a strange feeling. The day was chaos, getting our stuff in and up in the lift. We were flat number 42 on the 7th floor. The items we couldn't get in the lift had to be taken up all the stairs by the removal men. I think they were grateful we weren't any higher, but I still wish we had been able to give them a better tip. In the evening, we settled down on our second-hand sofa given to us by a cousin of a friend and watched some TV. We smoked cigarettes on the balcony, looking at the park, and fell asleep on our mattress on the floor super early because we had no energy to put the bed together yet, and Jamie had work at a hideous time of the morning. We slept soundly last night. I felt safe and happy. I don't think that feeling is coming back anytime soon, and it's all due to the note I found this morning. I found it in the kitchen, having a coffee, hours after Jamie had left for his early shift at work. It was in one of those cupboards that were fixed to the wall. There were a bunch of useful items from the previous tenant. Spare keys to the flat, a set of tiny keys that locked and unlocked the windows, necessary for those with kids this high up, spare smoke alarm batteries, and a folded up piece of paper. The note was handwritten with "New occupier of flat 42" in beautiful cursive on the blank side. I opened it up and sat down to read. I can't really describe it to you, so I'm going to copy it out below. Dear new occupier, firstly, welcome to your new home. I lived here before you for 35 years with my husband. Unfortunately, he had an incident at home recently that I'd rather not discuss that claimed his life. My sister has now decided I can't keep up with the demands of the property and has insisted that I move in with her and her husband. I was reluctant at first, but the stairs do kill me at my age, and without Bernie, it's filled with sadness. Anyway, when you've lived somewhere for as long as I have, it feels like a person that you know. You understand its personality and what makes it tick. I thought I was probably pertinent that I imparted some of that knowledge onto you. It's a wonderful home, honestly. I have lived through the best and the worst years, and leaving it behind is very emotional. But if you are to survive and get the best out of it, then there are some steps you need to follow. 1. The landlord will never bother you. He doesn't visit, call, or communicate in any way. But make sure to pay your rent in a timely fashion always. I have only dealt with him once in 35 years, and let's just say I never missed another rent day. Any repairs required, you speak to the agent you rented the place with. 2. Do not use the communal lift between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m. Just don't do it. This step is vital if you are to have a happy life here. It really is life or death. Don't do it. This has cost me and many others in the building greatly, and I would rather not elaborate on why you shouldn't do this. Just please don't do it. I cannot stress this enough. 3. When you hear the strange animal noises coming from flat 48, don't question it. Mr. Prentice lives there, and he is a lovely chap. Do not be afraid to say hello to him in the corridor or on the stairs. He's old school, so he never risks the lift. But whatever you do, do not check on him when you hear the noises. You'll know when you hear them. 4. If you ever come across a window cleaner on the balcony, ignore him. He may seem like the nicest fellow you've ever had trying to sell you something at the door, but it really is best that you don't engage. He will go away if you ignore him, but he tries pretty hard the first few times, so you'll need some resilience. Whatever you do, do not offer him anything. No money, no hot drink. 5. Don't leave food scraps out. Bin or refrigerate them immediately. If you have small animals, it is imperative that you watch them eat and take away any leftover food immediately after they're done. This and Rule 2 go hand in hand. Okay. The things forage all day and seem to really love animal feed. You don't want them in your flat, I promise. You can leave what you want out between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m., so you may want to feed your pets then. 6. Don't communicate with any neighbors who claim to come from flats 65 through 72. These flats suffered a fire in the late 80s that devastated the whole floor. All the residents died in their homes. The building was mostly council owned at that time, and they never bothered to renovate the flats. They've been empty ever since, but every now and again someone will knock on your door claiming to live in one of these flats and ask to borrow some sugar. They will seem entirely average, but you must shut and lock the door immediately. I installed 2 extra security bolts to avoid these fuckers. I don't like to swear at my age, but they really are fuckers. 7. Simple one for you here. Keep a weapon in each room. Sometimes you follow all these steps and something still slips through the net. Better to be safe than sorry. 8. The building has a committee that will try to get you to join. It's one of those neighbors groups about improving living conditions for all the residents. It's a nice group, and the lady who runs it, Terry from Flat 26, is a fantastic neighbor. By all means, get involved, but I wouldn't recommend babysitting Terry's 2 children. She'll ask you because the poor woman needs a break, but if you accept, don't say I didn't warn you. 9. Stray hairless cats sometimes roam the hallway. I know they're supposedly a special, expensive breed, but they don't belong to anyone. They're mostly harmless, but don't pick them up. Not unless you want to see one of those neighbors that claims to live in 65 through 72. Then grab the cat and lock it inside with you. It'll burn your skin a little, but the cats are friendly, and I wouldn't want to see them hurt. 10. There's 2 more rules, by the way. 10. There is no way to fix the damp patch on the ceiling in the bedroom. Sometimes it'll turn a deep crimson and look quite concerning, but please try not to be alarmed. It doesn't drip, and it doesn't get any bigger, and it's been there longer than I have. The landlord won't budge on it, according to the agents. I flagged it many times, even called the police the first night it changed color. It was a waste of time, and it will be for you too. It's best to ignore it. 11. You can trust the postman. His name is Ian Flanders, and he has been the postman since before I moved in. He has his own key to the main door and delivers post to the door every morning at 8:54. I can't include everything here, or it would become a novel, but if you have any questions, Ian will help you. 12. Finally, the first few weeks are the worst. You'll feel like you've made a mistake. I'm sure reading this you already do. But if you can get through the first few weeks, it really is a lovely block to live in. Every property has its quirks, and this one is a little extra special. But you can be truly happy here if you just take my advice, and I wish you all the best. I really do. Yours truly, Mrs. Prudence Hemmings. I don't really know what to think after reading the note. Hopefully it was some sort of joke, but the agent said the previous tenant was an elderly lady, and I can't really see anyone named Prudence Hemmings attempting to play practical jokes on someone they'd never met. There was also parts of the note I couldn't disprove. There was indeed a large damp patch above the bed that me and Jamie had already discussed reporting. No crimson, but it definitely existed. I also commented on a beautiful Sphinx cat roaming the halls as we were moving in. I started to get seriously freaked out. Our dream, our beautiful little home, had just become a source of fear and confusion. I checked the time and it was 9:14. Damn it, I don't have time to catch Postman Ian. When I opened the door to check, sure enough, 2 letters addressed to Mrs. Hemmings sat on the doorstep. At about 11:15, my worst fears were truly confirmed when a friendly middle-aged looking man carrying window cleaning equipment knocked on my balcony door. I ignored him. I didn't want to take the risk until I'd spoken to Jamie and showed him the note. I texted him already to rush home. I felt bad as the man rapped his knuckles against the door for over 10 minutes, but honestly, the longer it went, the more I was terrified. My windows were sparkling, and due to our lack of curtains, I couldn't even hide from his gaze. I felt so exposed. He stayed for a total of 30 minutes exactly, and never once did he stop looking at me or knocking. He shouted the occasional ultra-friendly line or humble request for a beverage in the heat through the door, but I did my best to avoid eye contact. When he finally left, I looked outside every window in the flat. I couldn't see him on any other balconies or see any equipment suggesting he was around. He had completely vanished. Jamie still hadn't texted me back. He must have been having a rough shift. It was a Friday, and they were always busy. It wasn't often that he didn't reply. He was due home in around an hour anyway. I read the note probably hundreds of times over. I tortured myself reading it for the next hour, desperately waiting for Jamie to come through the door and tell me it was all crazy and I should relax. I hoped for that so much. But Jamie never came. His shift should have finished around midday, but by 2 p.m. he still wasn't home. I panicked. I cried. I left over 100 voice messages on his phone, but got nowhere. I finally decided it had been long enough that calling his work wouldn't embarrass him, and his boss told me that he had never turned up for his shift. I thought about it. What could have happened? And then it hit me. Jamie's shift started at 4 a.m. today. He would have left the flat at 3:15 and taken the lift down the stairs. I don't know what to do. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a big joke. Maybe Jamie wrote the note and got his boss in on it. A voice in my head kept telling me that he couldn't write like that if he tried, but I had attempted to fool myself. It's getting late and he still isn't home. What if it's all true? I think I made a big mistake. Oh, we have a part 2. Alright, part 2. So much has happened in the last 24 hours. I'm so stressed that I've barely slept since I discovered that Jamie was missing. It's starting to make me feel a little twitchy, but I thought I'd better update you guys. I was overwhelmed by all the suggestions you gave and have taken more than a few of them on board. I'm definitely going to be getting a huge planter full of sage for the balcony, and I did smell a little salt on my doorway. I'm sorry to disappoint, but that didn't help at all. There's nothing I'm following quite like Mrs. Hemming's rules. I followed them to the letter so far, and lo and behold, I'm still alive. That's not to say it hasn't been tough. I'll start from the beginning. I was going crazy. In the few hours after my last post, Jamie still hadn't returned. He had been gone for almost 24 hours. His work has called me multiple times. Why do I feel like I'm missing a part? No. Okay. I was going crazy, and a few hours after my last post, he hasn't returned. His work has called me multiple times. I don't know what to say, so I just keep ghosting the calls. I was bang in the middle of danger time when I decided checking the lift had to be my first step, but I wasn't going to break that rule. I waited. I waited desperately for 3:34 to come, and I'm ashamed to say that when I did, I remained paralyzed to the sofa for almost half an hour before I found the nerve to leave the flat. It was 4:02 when I finally reached the lift. The lift in this building is old and rickety. It hadn't been updated in a very long time and has likely been here as long as the building. Its big, clunky buttons stared back at me as I glared at them, hoping for some sort of answer or clue. My heart thumped and I was overcome with a feeling of dread, but nothing came of any of it. It was hopeless. I stepped inside the lift, rode it up and down a few floors, and searched the entire perimeter with a phone torch for anything I could find. I found nothing. Jamie had completely disappeared. Sobbing and exhausted, I rode back to floor 7 and turned my key in flat 42, the perfect home that felt anything but home at this point. I sat in the cheap flat pack dining table we'd managed to put together on move-in day and cried, my hands shaking as I held my phone. I was flitting between reading all of your comments and contemplating calling the police for an hour, but I decided to call my friend Georgia instead. I needed a real person here. Things were so crazy I wasn't sure the police would be able to help with that little information I had, but I knew I needed to sound it out with someone. I'll spare you the details again, but I told her everything. She promised she'd be with me in the late morning. She had to take her younger brother to school. I waited anxiously, not before arming every room exactly as advised. Before I knew it, I looked at the clock and it was 8:23. I had around half an hour until the postman was due to show up. There was no way I was missing him today. I stood by the door looking vacantly at the wood like someone in a film who was possessed. The exhaustion was really setting in, but Jamie was all I could think of. Pure adrenaline was keeping me standing. At 8:52 I opened the door. The next 2 minutes were the longest of my life, but when I saw him, a wave of relief swept my entire body. Right on cue at 8:54 the postman, Ian Flanders, stood in front of me, a smile that barely hid his concern covering his younger than expected face. He didn't look old enough to have been the postman for over 35 years, but I was too distracted by the answers that I needed from him to care. "You must be the new tenant," he stated, but in a way that it sounded like a question. I struggled with my answer, so I got straight to the point. "Mrs. Hemmings left me a note. She said to speak to you if..." "Can I come in, dear? I think we need a chat." I ushered Ian in, my hands still shaking as I flapped them in the direction of the sofa, gesturing to him to sit down. I shoved the now slightly crumpled note into his lap and waited. I'm glad Prue thinks that highly of me. I will miss that old girl," he said with a coy smile as he reached the end of the note. "Can you help me or not?" I had no time for his ego trip over a moved neighbor. "I can't help, but I can't stop for long, so it'll have to be quick. I've walked these halls delivering the post for 40 years. I've seen it all. Everything Prue's mentioned and more. What do you need to know?" he said. Ian was nothing like I expected. The note made me feel like he was going to be all kindly, old granddad type figure, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Postman Ian spoke with a thick city accent, wore a heavy gold chain around his tattooed neck. He dyed his graying hair boot-polished black. His demeanor was thankfully non-threatening, but extraordinarily cocky. He was the sort of man I imagined in a betting shop, rubbing his grubby hands on notes as he bagged over a win. He didn't ask as he lit a cigarette in my living room. I didn't question it. We would usually smoke outside, but I wasn't going to argue over technicalities. I grabbed a bowl for the ash and lit one too. Let's start with the things in the lift. My boyfriend is missing and he took the lift at 3:15 over 24 hours ago. We haven't got this note yet. I hadn't heard from him since. I need to get him back, I barked at him, as if the louder I spoke, the more I could influence his answer. But nothing prepared me for what he said. His skin turned pale and his harsh-looking face became more sympathetic as he explained. "He's dead, love. Forget about him now. Only one person has ever come back from the lift at that time of night, and it was Prue herself. After witnessing it, those creatures ripping their victim apart. Poor Prue was traumatized. Your boy is gone. Let's go and follow the rules." He was blunt, but I could tell he felt sorry for me. "There must be something I can do," I pleaded. "There are things I've heard to bring back those who are lost, but I've never seen solid proof they work. It would be irresponsible of me to tell you to do so, something that might get you killed too. It's nice here, honest. Just get over him and live the status quo. Sorry if I sound harsh, I don't mean to, but you seem like a decent young lady, and I don't want to see you go too soon." I asked about what Mrs. Hemming had seen in the lift, and if they were sure it happened to all who entered it. I refused to believe that Jamie was dead. There had to be something I could do, and if I knew what I was dealing with, I could be better prepared. It was awful what happened. I wasn't there, but this is what I was told. Little Lila was such a cute kid. She used to open the door and give me a tip when I delivered the post. She was Prue's granddaughter. Lila was her son's little girl, and that night she was staying over for the first time. Prue finally felt confident that she could protect Lila from all the strange things that happen here. She was wrong. Little Lila had a problem with sleepwalking. She took a trip into the hallway at 1:30 in the morning. Prue took a little too long to notice the sound she had heard was the front door, and by the time she reached the lift, she saw the creatures dragging Lila's limbs away from her body. She tried to fight them, even killed one, but she couldn't save the little girl. I was hysterical, imagining Jamie's fate. What are the creatures? Have you ever actually seen them? I asked. No one really knows what they are. There's something to do with the building and all its quirks. No one's ever seen them elsewhere. We don't know where they came from, just that they're here. I've seen them a few times over the years, usually when new neighbors have left biscuits down for their cats and dogs, or haven't disposed of food waste properly. They're curious little creatures, mostly harmless, out of the hours Prue warned you about. But if they're fed, they can be quite vicious, looking for more food. That's why you have to bin all of your scraps, or hide them, or pack them, or whatever. Just don't leave them out, and don't use the lift at those times, and you're safe from the creatures. They're a little smaller than humans, but they're a similar shape. They come with grotesque rodent-like features, and are far larger than any rodent could be. Like rodent children, I suppose. They have 2 sharp rows of teeth per jaw, and are consistently hungry. When they eat, they crunch down in a violent, disgusting way, dripping spittle everywhere. Prue said she could hear her granddaughter's bones shatter in those jaws. He went pale at the thought of that, but continued. When they first arrived in the building, there were hundreds. It caused pandemonium amongst the residents. We lost residents of more than 30 of the individual homes. But the residents fought back and managed to kill all but the strongest minority of them. The creatures left over were incredibly dangerous and seemingly impossible to eradicate. So the residents struck a deal. A deal that they will be left unharmed and allowed to live in the building in return for the residents' safety at all times. But if anyone wanders into the lift between 1:11 and 3:30 a.m., they are fair game. This time frame is the period the creatures are at their most frenzied, and restricting them to the lift was safer for all the parties. God help anyone who encounters them during those hours. They've been here ever since, claimed lots of unsuspecting people avoiding the stairs, but nothing like when they first arrived. A few got put down for not holding up their end of the bargain, but we hadn't had an incident outside the lift in years. Count yourself lucky you missed that crisis. Everything here is pretty peaceful now. I'm sorry about your boyfriend. I really have to go. I'm late for my round. He scrawled his phone number on a bit of paper and handed it to me. Emergencies only. I don't like to be bothered. You can't go. The note said you would help me, I exclaimed. And I will, he snapped back. Well, there's something I can help with. I can't resurrect your boyfriend, and I don't like to be late delivering the post. I'll see you soon. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I couldn't believe he was leaving me after the information overload and all the small ray of hope he had lit inside me and then squashed. I'll call the police, I shouted, desperate to feel as if I was solving this somehow. You can try if you want, Ian sighed as he opened the door to leave. It just aggravates the creatures, and it isn't going to bring your boyfriend back. Mr. Prentice hates it when the police come too. If you want to get any sleep in the next week, then I'd avoid it. Wait a week, report him missing, and learn to adapt to life here, or you'll be dead in days. With that, he shut the door behind him. I opened it again. I had so much more to ask, but he was gone. No sign of him anywhere in the corridor. Maybe it was me losing my mind, but I might be imagining all these things. No matter how much I willed it, the note was still there, and Jamie still wasn't. Georgia arrived not long after Ian had left. I, of course, asked if she had seen him in the corridor, to try to affirm myself that he was real, but she hadn't. She looked at me worried, and held me as I sobbed and told her what the postman had said about Jamie and the creatures. I wasn't sure she believed me. Even as she read the note, she looked skeptical. If she was skeptical, I wouldn't have blamed her, but she had always been supportive. She sat down with me for the hours while I just sobbed, heartbroken. I was so conflicted as to what to do. It felt insane that I hadn't contacted anybody, but this note had turned out to be accurate so far, and if the postman was to be trusted, then I should wait. Georgia had been my best friend for many years. She stuck up for me when I was too scared to do it for myself. Ooh. Hello! Hi, Nabu! Welcome in, viewers. Hello, hello, hello. We are doing spooky stories. What were you up to? Diplomacy is not an option. Very interesting. Let me get you a little shout out here. And we shall continue. They're a little spooky. Welcome in with your community. Hope you had a fun time. We're in part 2 of the previous tenant of my new flat left me a survival guide. Georgia had been my best friend for many years. She stuck up for me when I was too scared to do it myself and had always been the brave one of the two of us. I felt safe around her. So after hours of crying and despairing at the way my life had changed in a matter of days, I finally decided to take a nap. It was early evening and Georgia was watching some TV. Just there for me if I needed her. Despite the deprivation, I struggled to fall asleep. I tried to imagine Jamie's arms around me, but it became a more painful reminder that they probably will never be able to again. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity of staring at the damp patch on the ceiling, I drifted off. About 3 hours ago, I woke up, staring at the goddamn damp patch on the ceiling, and could hear chatting in the living room. I jumped out of bed and walked towards it. Georgia was on the sofa with a middle-aged looking woman, both nursing a cup of tea in the matching mugs that Jamie had gotten me as a move-in present. My blood boiled, but it wasn't their fault. I cleared my throat to get their attention. "Oh, Katie! This is Natalia. She lives upstairs. We got chatting, so I made her a cup of tea. I hope you don't mind." I looked at the dark-haired woman on the sofa, drinking tea from my cup, and nodded. Georgia was a sociable idiot with no understanding of when to not be herself. I wasn't going to lament her for it right now. It was her coping. Of course. "Hi, Natalia. What flat do you live in?" I tried my very best to be polite. I would have to not discuss bringing people into my home mid-tragedy with Georgia after she had left, but until then, I would be neighborly. "Flat 71. It's so nice to meet you. You have a lovely home," Natalia responded, her lips curled at the corners into a smile that wasn't replicated in her eyes or the rest of her facial expression. She looked at me smugly, with full knowledge that I was aware of the implications of what she just said. The rules. The flat number. Every now and again, someone will knock at your door claiming to live in one of these flats and ask to borrow some sugar. They will seem entirely average, but you must shut and lock the door immediately. I installed 2 extra security bolts to avoid those fuckers. I don't like to swear at my age, but they really are fuckers. Prue's warning echoed in my mind, and I couldn't take my eyes off Natalia. Something really was off about her. I looked at Georgia, sat on the sofa next to her, and noticed her sweating. Anyone in the UK knows that it's been hot for a few days, but this was beyond just the ambient temperature. Her entire body was dripping. Suddenly she began to pant. Natalia's eyes were locked to mine, just like the window cleaners had been. Nothing happened before with the cleaner, except this time the rule had been broken. She was already in the flat. Georgia started to scream as her skin blistered and charred. Her hair fell from her scalp as the skin flaked and melted away from every inch of her. She was being burned alive without a flame in sight. She scratched frantically at her own melting face, digging into the exposed raw flesh. The sound of a person makes when they burn alive is like no other. That will never leave me. I screamed and screamed, but no one came to my door. I tried to grab my phone to call Postman Ian, but the wooden surface I had set down on burned my fingers to the touch and forced me to recoil. She's going to set the whole flat alight. My actions needed to be quicker than a phone call. I grabbed hold of a large knife I had set on the side earlier when weaponing. The handle blistered my fingers instantly, but I didn't care. I needed to get her out now and help Georgia if I could. I ran towards the dark-haired lady, sweat dripping from my brow. Then the closer I got and plunged the knife into Natalia's throat. She gripped it and fell to the floor. She didn't bleed like a normal human. Her insides were black. She was still moving, and I figured it probably wouldn't be long before she stood right back up and tried again. So I dragged her into the hallway, ready to bolt the door. As we reached the entrance of the corridor, one of the cats was waiting, hissing at her semi-conscious body. I caught her eyes fixate on it as I dumped her on the floor. I grabbed the cat, pulled him inside, wincing as its skin caused more burns on my lower arms, shut the door, and watched through the peephole. She got up and held her hand to the wound, cauterizing it and walking off towards the lift, as if she hadn't been injured at all. I dropped the cat by that point, but every bit of naked skin it had touched throbbed and burned for at least an hour. Georgia hadn't been as lucky as Natalia with injury recovery. I anonymously called an ambulance for her. I couldn't believe it, but she was still breathing. She was badly burned and her life wouldn't be the same again, but she was alive. And for that, I was grateful. Excuse me. It sounds awful, but I left her at the park across the road from the building, with no phone or ID. She's my best friend, and I want to be there, but if I own up to the involvement in injuries that bad, they'll suspect me. And I lose the already slim chance that Jamie might be savable. It doesn't mean I don't care about her, but she's alive. I don't believe Jamie isn't until I see it. So now I'm alone again, in that flat, conflicted about what to do. I want to leave, so badly, but this was mine and Jamie's first home together. If he's alive, I can save him, then I wanted to be here for him to come back to. And if he's dead, and the postman is right, then I don't know if I can leave his memory behind. There's only one person I can think to help me right now, so I'm going to do some research, hunt down an address, and tomorrow morning, I'm going to visit Prudence Hemmings, the author of that survival guide. We have a part 3. Possibly the final part? It is not the final part. Quick water break. Anyone that is just tuning in from Nebu's raid, the previous tenant of my new flat left a survival guide today. We finally meet her. So we have this couple, her Katie, I'm assuming is the main character, and her boyfriend Jamie moved into a very suspicious flat in the UK. And the previous tenant, a Prudence Hemmings, had left a survival guide, noting many of the strange rules that they should follow to stay safe while living in this building. One was already broken before she had gotten to the note, which is why Jamie is now missing and or presumed dead. Another one being that Georgia, who is not a tenant but just a friend, had let in a resident that claimed to be in a block of apartments that were listed to not be trusted. And now we meet Prudence Hemming. I didn't get much sleep after last night either. The lack of sleep is making me wonder whether all these things happening are in my mind or not. But I'm reminded every time that I see the damn note that it's all real. I spent hours last night searching for anything I could about Prudence Hemmings. If she had lived in a big creepy mansion, I imagine she would have been easy to find. But us folk who live in tower blocks aren't so well documented. No one cares about our lives, no matter how extraordinary. I found an article about missing person Lila Hemmings. It suggested that she went missing under the care of her grandmother while playing in the park opposite the flats early in the morning. Interviews with her parents stated that they had both disowned Prudence. Despite the many years that had passed since Lila's death/disappearance, her parents appeared to have remained unforgiving of Prue. There is no mention of her on either the social media accounts, and she had appeared to have no involvement with the children they had acquired since. Searches for the Hemmings family in the local area were equally dead ends. I looked at her link after link, desperate to find something, but they all had started to blur into one. Until, finally, I saw something. An obituary for Bernard Bernie Hemmings, who had fallen from a tower block in an unexplained circumstances after being diagnosed with dementia months before his death. I was surprised it hadn't made bigger news. It had only been about a year. There were no details of where to find them, but his wife Prudence and her sister Bridget were listed as contacts to find out details of the funeral. It's scary what you can do with the internet these days, but just with those phone numbers, I was able to put them into a reverse directory and find an address for Bridget and Tony Bishop, the sister and brother-in-law that Prudence was supposedly living with. About 4 a.m., I managed to get some sleep. Not much though. I was back up and wide awake at around 7 a.m., planning my route and working out my day. I saw a post on social media from one of her relatives that Georgia was identified and is stable. This loosened the knot in my stomach that has been present since I found the note somewhat. At 8:50, I opened the door to my flat hoping to see postman Ian. 4 minutes passed, and instead of the postman, an elderly gentleman made his way down the corridor. He had a walking stick and kind eyes. In his free arm, he carried a small plastic bag containing a newspaper and milk. He smiled and said good morning as he passed. I smiled back. He reminded me of my granddad. I imagined him pulling cola cubes from his pocket for his grandkids and shushing them when their parents weren't looking. A little further down the corridor, the old man stopped and turned, and looked at me dead in the eyes with a sympathetic expression and spoke. No post on a Sunday, if that's what you're waiting for. He smiled knowingly and turned to unlock a door that, until shut, I couldn't see the number of it. When I saw the door close and the number 48 boldly displayed above the peephole, I understood what Prudence meant. Mr. Prentice did seem to be a lovely chap. I sat back in my flat and sighed, staring at the various tabs open on my laptop. At about 9:15, the knocking on the balcony door started. The window cleaner was back. I didn't feel half as terrified as I had the first time. If anything, I was just angry. It took every ounce of restraint I had in my tired body to not engage with him, if only to tell him to fuck off. His genuine seeming request just irritated me. After about 20 minutes of being watched, the knocking started to give me a headache, so I grabbed a bag and left the flat. I decided there was no time like the present. If I was going to turn up on the Bishop's doorstep looking for her sister because of the freaky flat she's left behind, then I had to go and get it over with. If the address was old or the Bishops weren't the people I was looking for, then I was going to look stupid whatever time of day I went. And I couldn't take the window cleaner's eyes anymore. There was something about them. They really do make you want to open that door. I looked at the lift as I entered the communal hallway and decided today I would take the stairs. I couldn't stand to be in a small box that my partner probably died very painfully in. My heart dropped to my stomach just at the sight of it. The stairs were as grody as the lift. We'd taken them multiple times on move-in day, but I hadn't really taken it in the same way I could now. I thought about the rules and all the strange things happening in this building. I looked at the badly painted numbers on the walls as I reached each landing. Nothing in this building is simple. I looked at the numbers. 7, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3, 4, 2, G. Maybe it was the sleep deprivation, but my legs were in agreement with my mind that I definitely just descended more than 6 flights of stairs. They glitched. I looked at the dusty and poorly lit stairwell from the bottom. It seemed dark despite the sun pouring in from the glass panel and in the main building doors. The note never mentioned glitchy stairs. Maybe I really was losing my mind. As I turned to exit the building, a woman walked in. She was in her late 30s to early 40s and had 2 small children in tow, 1 boy and 1 girl. I guessed that they were twins. They were both incredibly blonde, with deep brown puppy dog eyes looking everywhere, and couldn't have been any older than 6 or 7. They were close to identical as it gets in twins of different genders. I'm not a fan of kids, but they were still very cute. The lady had a short bob haircut that got longer at the front. Oh, kind of like mine. It was a uniform and dyed a perfect, even auburn color. I knew it was dyed because her roots were blonde like her kids. She looked as tired as I felt, but she pulled herself together when she saw me, running fingers through parts of her hair that she must have missed however early she left this morning. Hi, are you here visiting? We opened with trying to make small talk. No, I just moved into flat 42 on the 7th floor. I was just leaving, actually. Whereabouts are you? I was desperate to go. I feared myself up to see Prue, but I didn't want to be rude. Oh, I'm flat 26. My name's Terry. This is Eddie and Ellie. She gestured to the 2 small children hiding shyly behind her skirt. Welcome to the block. Please, if you ever need anything, please feel free to give me a shout. My name is Katie, but people call me Kat too. That's really kind of you. Thank you, I will. Is there something wrong with the stairs? I stopped myself before going into detail. Nothing wrong. They just skip sometimes, she answered, shrugging. Well, I'd love to stop and chat, but I actually really need to get going. It was nice to meet you, Terry. I tried to work out what was wrong with the children as I stepped forward to walk away, still baffled by the stairs. By the way, we have a residence committee. You should come to one of our meetings. They're every Tuesday in alternating flats. This Tuesday is at Molly Jefferson's in flat 31. Come along, we'd love to have you, Terry suggested, waving me off. I walked out the doors after my encounter with Terry, feeling sick. Every minute in this place made the note more real. Every word jumped off the page and into my life. It made more likely that Jamie was really gone. I rode the bus from a stop not too far from the flats. It felt like it took an eternity to reach the little suburban area I was looking for. A 5-minute walk away from the bus I got off at, and I was staring at a quaint little bungalow belonging to Bridget and Tony Bishop. I knocked on the door. The lady who opened it was unsteady on her feet. She was probably in her 70s, with wispy white hair neatly scraped back into a bow, 2 strands left hanging that just softened her wrinkled face. She wore a dusty rose-colored dress that hung just below her knees and smelled of stale cigarette smoke. Can I help you? She asked bluntly. My name is Kat. I'm looking for Prudence Hemmings, I answered, stuttering slightly. Her eyes widened slightly. Why? She asked bizarrely. Is she here? It's private. The lady ushered me into the house, sat me down on the sofa. Within minutes there was a cup of tea in front of me. She didn't say anything to me for a while. We just looked at each other. Then she finally broke the silence. I wondered if you'd try and find me. It took me a long time to decide whether to leave that note or not, but I decided that you deserve a head start. That's more than I ever got. The woman was Prudence. She was nothing like I had imagined. She seemed tough and hardened and spoke with a more blunt tone. She contributed before I could answer. Terry called me not long ago. She told me that she had met the new tenant. She said that you looked shaken up and said that my note may not have been enough. I did say that I couldn't fit everything on there, and the stairs didn't seem too important. The committee wanted to organize a meeting with you on your moving day in, but I told them that that was intrusive. The whole committee thing always seemed a bit excessive to me anyway. She spoke flippantly, like it was nothing. It may have been intrusive, but we needed a warning. We spent a night in the place before I found your note. My boyfriend had already left for work at 3:15 and taken the lift. He didn't know. I broke as I told her what had happened. Her face dropped. And so did my hope for Jamie. I'm so sorry. I really don't know what to say. I thought my note would reach you in time, she mumbled, her face to the floor, refusing to look at me as tears streamed down my face. He's gone, isn't he? I didn't want to accept it, but I spoke to the postman, and your face says all it needs to. The postman said that there might be a way that I can get it back. I bit at her, devastated and angry. He's gone. You can't have him back. What Ian is referring to isn't what you think. There's a way that to get people back from the lift, but not as themselves. Trust me, I learned the hard way. Once they're back, you can't reverse it. I'm sorry about your man, but he's gone forever. Don't dig into the other way. To be gone forever is luckier than the alternative. She still wouldn't look up from the floor. What do you mean? I don't want to talk about it. I said in the note that there are things I'd rather not discuss, and I need you to respect that or I won't be speaking to you at all. Now move on and ask what you need to ask. Prudence cut me off. I decided to not push the topic further and moved on to some other things I needed to know. What's the deal with Terry's kids? They seem sweet and normal. Those little demon creatures are anything but normal, she answered, wincing slightly at the thought of them. When she went into labor, Terry never made it to the hospital. They were the first children to ever be born inside the building, and with everything that goes on, it's like something rubbed off on them. They're average children in the daytime, but they never sleep. Ever. Poor Terry hasn't had a day's rest since they were born. They also really love to steal birds and rats they find the cats playing with and torment them. It really annoys the cats. As she finished speaking, a small hairless cat strutted out from behind an armchair across the room, meowing softly. It brushed its head against Prue's exposed legs, leaving scorch marks where it touched. She didn't react, just reached down and stroked the top of its head, smiling as it purred. And those? I asked, eyes stuck to her now badly burned legs. She chuckled, pulled out a box and lit a cigarette, tapping the top layer of ash into a small silver dish in front of her. She offered me one and I took it gladly. They've always been my good friends. I couldn't leave the building without bringing a part of home with me. This little guy is Damon. He has seen some things, she gushed, not taking her eyes off the cat. But where did they come from? Why are they everywhere? I asked, watching in disbelief as her burn subsided. It seemed impossible, but I looked at my arms where I picked up the cat the night before and there was no evidence it had ever happened. They didn't even appear sunburned. No one really knows. They started to appear after the fire, a few years after I moved in. It was rumored that they were the pets of the residents that burned, and that was why they had no fur. I don't think that's true. Hi, Gee, welcome. I interrupted. I met one of those neighbors last night. She said her name was Natalia. She almost killed my best friend. You're crazy if you think your no was enough of a warning, I ranted emotionally. Look, girl. If I had made a song and dance about warning you, then you would have thought me crazy and challenged the rules, but they've been dead already. Be grateful you got anything. I didn't. I had to work it all out. Your generation is so spoiled. She tutted in frustration at me. I was angry, but she was probably right. An elderly lady telling me rat-like creatures could kill my boyfriend in a lift would probably have gotten some laughs from me a few days ago. I stayed quiet and waited for her to calm down. After a while, she sighed and started again. I think the cats are the neighbors that burned. They've never meant any harm, and they hiss and run from the imposters that roam the building. Besides, there's no way that there were that many cats living on one floor. The imposter people don't even match up with the residents that died in the fire. None of them look like or claim to have the same name as the dead. They just claim to live in their flats. I've met Natalia before. She left a bad scar on Bernie's leg from the incident we had, nasty girl. Before the fire, there was a CCTV and there was a recording saved about 15 people marching into the flats that led up to the floor about half an hour before the fire started. It was the only evidence found. CCTV wasn't great in the 80s, so they were never identified. The flames melted any irrelevant cameras, so nothing ever came out of it. I think the people that entered that night are the ones that asked for sugar. I don't know any more than that, but if you avoid them, like I said, you don't need to know more. They hate the cats. I hope your friend survives, but I've seen what those people can do, so maybe she was better off dead. Prue carried on stroking Damon. I watched the skin of her fingers melt and twist as they made contact with him. What happened to your husband? I asked the question so fast I didn't have time to consider that this was a topic she had explicitly said she didn't want to discuss in the note. But I had to know. She scowled at me. I said I didn't want to talk about that, she hissed. I just lost the love of my life. I need some answers, I begged. What happened to Bernie won't help you. I know you'd think any death in that building would be down to the quirks, but this wasn't. For the most part, anyway. Don't forget that we had lived there for 35 years. Bernie knew the rules. We knew how to take care of ourselves and have a happy life there. It was our home. I don't doubt that, Mrs. Hemmings. I'm sorry, I interjected. Bernie had dementia. It started 6 months before he died, and he deteriorated very rapidly. Towards the end, he started wandering. The doctor said it was common, but in our position, it was incredibly dangerous. More times than I can count, I pulled him away from the lift just in time. Along with wandering, he was forgetting the rules. He let that smug, awful window cleaner in 3 times. Thank Lord for the big metal pipe I kept by the balcony door. Chased him out a tree. Not that anything stops him from coming back. I'm sure you're already acquainted. After all the dangerous situations Bernie was in, by the end, he made the smallest and most fatal of errors. He left a bowl of food out for Damon at 10 a.m. I was out shopping with Terry and a few of the girls from the committee, and when I came back, I found one of those awful creatures. Prudence started to cry. I put my hand on her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. After all, I truly knew how she felt. It was eating him. She sniffed and steadied herself to continue, moving my hand. I chased the creature away with the same metal pipe I had the window cleaner and pushed Bernie off the balcony. He was heavy, but I didn't want anyone to know what really killed him. His teeth. They made such an awful noise. It reminded me of Lila. I finished her sentence. I hadn't meant to. I was so invested in her story that I couldn't help it. I gather you spoke with Ian then, she said, sounding resigned. I never meant to hurt that little girl. I loved her so much. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. Damon, who was now sat next to her on the sofa, shuffled closer as if to cuddle her. Haven't you ever been curious about getting her back? I asked. My mind turning back to the methods hinted at by both Prue and the postman. I miss Jamie so much. I'd do anything to get him back. Her face filled with a look of horror and shame. Of course I have, she answered, which is exactly why I'm telling you not to. But I couldn't let it go. Surely anything must be better than gone forever, I pestered. I wish I hadn't. Prudence, frustrated, stood up and gestured for me to follow. She led me outside to the back garden of the bungalow. At the back was a large shed, the kind people use for a man cave or a summer house. It was pretty. The sun shone down on it, lighting up a few cobwebs in the corner and making them twinkle. Mrs. Hemmings was careful to look into both neighboring gardens to ensure there was no one around before she unlocked the door to the shed. We stepped inside, and the first thing to hit me was the smell. It was putrid, like rotting meat. I looked at the floor and covered my nose with my hand. Staring back at me was a pool of blood. I followed the blood with my eyes as Prudence locked us in the shed. Then after I made it past the animal bones, I finally saw it. Just like Postman Ian had described. One of the creatures was watching me from a heavy-duty metal dog cage in the corner of the shed. It looked reinforced, but still the metal had chew marks. Their jaws had to be strong to cause that. That didn't surprise me looking at it. Its rodent-like nose and beady yet somehow human eyes were nothing compared to the two very visible rows of jagged, sharp teeth that lined each gum. Despite its small stature, it was terrifying. Prudence opened a drawer in a dusty cupboard across the room and pulled out a can of dog food. She poured the contents into a bowl and passed the bowl through the feeding hatch. The cage had a safety feature, meaning the animal couldn't access the food until the hatch was locked from the outside. I was grateful for this. Prue turned to me and spoke. She brushed one of the two strands of hair framing her face behind her ear. Gesturing to the hideous creature, she said, "Cat, I would like to introduce you to my granddaughter, Lila." Oh, there's a part 4. Is there a part 5? I want to know how long this is. Oh my god, there's a part 5. My oh my. This is longer than I expected. We might have to save the other story for next time. We continue with the previous tenant. I was in complete shock looking at it, at her. Lila was in a cage. Prudence had a facial expression filled with guilt, and now I knew the truth. I could see it. The creature was exactly how Ian described, except with wavy ginger hair and a sadness in its beady eyes. This abomination was Lila. This was how Prudence had brought her back, and this was the only way I would ever see Jamie again. A risk I wasn't going to take. After days of disbelief, the reality finally hit me like a ton of bricks. Jamie was dead, and he wasn't coming back. "Why did you do this?" I asked, my voice shaking with horror. Prudence scowled at me, trying to mask her shame. "I didn't want this. If you think this is my aim, then you're sicker than I am. I just wanted my granddaughter back." When she died, a part of me died too. My son blamed me, his wife blamed me, and although he never said it, I could see it in Bernie's eyes that he did too. I'd pushed for her to stay. I wanted to spend more time with her. I got cocky about my ability to cope with the strange occurrences in the flats. I know what you must be thinking, but I swear I didn't know about the sleepwalking until it was too late. We had moved into the flat not long after my son left home to move in with his girlfriend. He's the youngest of three and was the last to fly the nest, so we downsized for the two of us. He never knew what we were facing in that flat or the dangers that he sent his little girl into. When it happened, it was the first years after the fire and the troubles with the creatures. We just struck the deal with the things in the lift, and the neighbors of the burned flats had become a fixture just like the other quirks. I really thought she would have been safe. Prudence paused to gaze longingly at the mutated little girl in the cage. The creature just twitched. In return, it bared its 4 rows of teeth and made a gentle hiss. But how did you do this? I stopped her with more urgency this time, looking at Rat Lila in disbelief. I had to get the answers out of her fast. I didn't want to spend any more time than was absolutely necessary in the shed. The gardener helped me, she answered, her voice trembling. Who the fuck is the gardener? I grew more impatient with every new confusion she threw at me. The last thing I needed was something new and potentially malevolent in the mix. I didn't mention him in my note because he's been gone for over 20 years. He'll be of no concern to you, so don't worry. His damage is in the past now. Around the time Lila went missing, the council granted planning permission for the tower block next door. But before that was built, the land it sits on acted as a communal garden for ours and the neighboring tower block on the other side. It had a regular gardener named Derek who you would often see tending the flower beds out front. Derek was one of the first people I met when I moved in. Like I said, I had to work it all out for myself the first time the window cleaner came to the balcony. I naturally reached to let him in and offer a cup of tea. As my hand applied pressure to the handle to open the balcony door, there was a knock at the front door. I made a gesture to the cleaner to indicate that I'd only be a minute and answered. There was Derek. He stopped me and told me not to let the man in, that I would be making a huge mistake. I thought he sounded crazy, and I told him so. After a while of arguing, I got up to boil the kettle and let the man in, and Derek grabbed my hands and shouted at me to look at the man outside. When I turned to look, there was no man outside, but a monster. He was tall and impossibly thin, flesh and bones, but somehow thinner than bones, with graying skin stretched over them. He had eyes that seemed to be so deep set that they went on forever, like the blackest cave you could imagine. Saliva dripped from his mouth and landed on my balcony floor, some sliding down the glass panel of the door. I opened my mouth to scream, but as I did, Derek let go of my hands and the monster was gone. In its place was that smug, friendly man, begging for a drink while he cleans the windows. It took me a minute to process it, but I know what I'd seen. That was the real window cleaner. I never intentionally opened or tried to open the door for him again. That day, Derek didn't stay long. He didn't tell me what the window cleaner is, or why he visits every few days. He didn't explain anything about the weird things that go on. As much as Derek was a part of the strange happenings, he was like one that had been carved from light. He said he'd always be around when I needed him, that it was his job to look after the residents just like the flower beds. Over the years, he appeared a few times. He was instrumental in striking a deal with the creatures. When the neighbors died in the fire, he created a special display for them in the garden and made sure that nothing planted was poisonous to the cats as soon as they arrived. He also stopped an imposter from killing Bernie at our front door. He seemed like such a good thing to the residents, always there to help, offer some gentle advice or a creative solution, someone to be trusted. He changed when they granted planning permission for the other block, though. He knew his garden would be dug up to lay foundations, and his uses redundant. He became grumpy and bitter over time, but no one paid enough attention to notice, especially not when my tragedy struck. When Lila died, I was devastated. Derek appeared to me as I sat on a bench in the garden crying. He offered to help me to use the garden to get her back. I snapped at him. I told him that it was his fault, and that he should have been there when it happened to stop them. He worked so hard on the agreement with the creatures. He spent a lot of time with them. Lila broke the rule and he had to allow them to do what had been agreed, he said. But he couldn't have stopped them. But he wanted to help make things right. I understood why he hadn't intervened, but I couldn't accept it. I lashed out at him. I'm embarrassed to say that I actually slapped the poor man along with stamping on his freshly planted flower bed. I was angry and grieving. I quickly burned myself out and collapsed into a blubbering heap on the floor. Derek attempted to comfort me, but his mind was on his garden. He said he was sorry for my loss, but I shouldn't have attacked the flower bed, that he'd always been nice to me, and I should be kinder in return. I snapped at him and told him it didn't matter because it was all about to be bulldozed in the next few days anyway. I should have taken more note of the way he twitched as I said that. He snapped. He said that he knew I was angry, but there was no need to take it out on him. If I was that desperate to get Lila back, he knew a way, but it was dangerous. I begged. Anything, I said. I would do anything. He told me it was simple, and that all I had to do was enter the lift and offer the creature some food while repeating the phrase "reverterer mortuus" during their frenzied hours. He said that there was no guarantee they wouldn't be crunching on my bones before I even got the first word out, but if I succeeded, I would have Lila back. Of course, it was successful. There wasn't a creature in sight as I performed the ritual as instructed. I thought nothing happened at first. She didn't appear straight away, but a few days later I found her running around inside my house. She had taken a chunk out of Damon's ear with her teeth. I tried to kill her at first, but just as I was about to finalize it, I saw in her eyes who she was. I tried to look for Derek, but by that point the workmen had started. Nothing was left of his garden, and nothing was left of Derek. No one has seen him since. You see, Kat, nothing in that building is totally harmless. You have to be on your guard at all times. I've kept her like this ever since. You may think I'm crazy, but I couldn't kill my own granddaughter. I'm not a monster. Prue sighed and ushered me back out of the shed. She locked the door behind us, closing the padlock on her most hideous secret. I was exhausted. It was a lot of information to take in, and as a result of the information I'd received, real grief for my boyfriend was finally setting in. Every hope I had was dashed. I know many of you tried to tell me in the comments that he was gone, but I wanted you to be wrong so bad. I couldn't bear to look at Prudence Hemmings for another moment. I made my excuses and left, morosely riding the bus back to the tower block I had once been so excited to live in. It was mid-afternoon by the time I got home. The choice between the stairs and the lift didn't strike much enthusiasm into me, but I opted for the stairs. And after what I'm sure ended up being 11 flights, I made it up the 6 flights up the stairs to my flat. I laid on our mattress on the floor and sobbed for Jamie. I sobbed so hard that my throat went dry and hurt, and my stomach cramped with each gasping breath. I sobbed myself to sleep. My body and mind must have given up fighting the need to rest and shut down. When I woke up, it was late, about 10 p.m. I wrote as much of my update as I could for you guys, hit post, and just sat in the dining table with my head in my hands. My whole life had fallen to shit, and I knew it. I thought so many things, questioned why they were happening to me. I searched social media for updates on Georgia, but there were none. Jamie wasn't super close with his family, but I knew it wasn't long before they'd start to worry. Everything I considered just snowballed in my mind. The loneliness in dealing with the situation was killing me. I decided to do something I usually wouldn't. I went downstairs, and I knocked on the door of flat 26. Terry answered. Her perfectly bobbed hair was a little bit unkempt and out of place. She had huge bags under her eyes, and I could smell wine on her breath. "Are you okay, Kat?" She looked concerned. I found it ironic that she looked so disheveled I had forgotten it was me who came for help. I'm sorry. I know I don't know you. I could barely speak. Don't worry. Prue called me. She told me everything. I'm sorry about your boyfriend. It's a shame I never got to meet him. Terry stared back at me with the same expression a mother would, warm and understanding. Would you like a cup of tea? Maybe something stronger? I'd love a coffee, please, I answered meekly. Making my way into the living room, her sofa was comfy. It reminded me of being back home at my parents' before any of this started. Terry trotted out to the kitchen, stumbling slightly. I could see the kitchen counter from the sofa, and the empty bottle of wine that accounted for her stumbling. As she boiled the kettle, there was a huge crash from somewhere inside the flat. I jumped, feeling startled. Terry coughed in a meager attempt to conceal the noise. Excuse me for just a moment, please, she muttered apprehensively as she walked out of the living area and into the hallway containing the bedrooms. I heard another crash, giggling, and some inaudible shouting. After a while, things went quiet, and Terry came back into the living room. Sorry about that, kids, she announced, brushing off the noises. I almost forgot about Eddie and Ellie. It was already late, but by the resigned expression on Terry's face indicated that this was how all her nights began. I nodded. I couldn't muster up much more of a response. I think she could see that I just needed to sit here. She got up to finish making, and then set the cup of tea in front of me with 2 digestive biscuits. Okay. I hadn't eaten properly in days and really needed the sugar. Turned out, me and Terry got along really well. We have similar tastes in movies, music, and food despite the age gap. We spoke about an hour about random, normal stuff. It was nice to get a break from the madness. I got used to the crashing sound around from the twins. I even laughed a few times. I'd forgotten what it felt like these past few days. The break didn't last long. The next noise that we heard was louder than the first. It was quickly followed by 2 small children running into the living room and diving into their mother's arms. I was taken aback for a moment. Eddie and Ellie were dressed in pajamas and were still the cute children that I had met in the hallway, but something was different. Their brown puppy dog eyes had become deep voids, like I'd imagined when Prue described the window cleaner's true form. And at the end of their fingers were long, sharp claws, protruding from where their nails should be. I didn't have time to recoil in the terror of their new looks. Terry clutched them and asked what's wrong. They wailed and buried their voids where their eyes should be into their mother's shoulders. Despite their terrifying exterior, the 2 were very scared little kids. It had been a very long day, and I thought my nightmare was over, but it was only just beginning. Ellie mumbled into Terry's shoulder in that high-pitched voice kids do when they're scared. Mommy, we're sorry, we didn't mean to let them in, we were just teasing. Shh, they're coming, hissed Eddie in the same distressed, high-pitched tone. What have you done? Terry asked, color drained from her face. The kids didn't get a chance to reply. Terry's face turned paler than I thought possible. I looked up, and standing in the living room doorway were about 10 people, all incredibly average looking. They were almost expressionless. They didn't look angry or pleased to see us. They were dressed in nondescriptive clothes. I imagine trying to describe them to one of those artists that draws pictures for the police, and I generally don't think even one of them had a distinguishing feature. That's why it took me a while to spot her in the crowd, even though she had been glaring at me the entire time. Natalia. Oh my god, this is quite the long series. How many have we had? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Part 5. Is this? Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, this is part 5. My god. I'm gonna... Hold on. I want to see how long this actually had. Can't quite tell. But part 5, the previous tenant, things just keep getting weirder. When I first saw Natalia, all I could picture was Georgia. The way her skin melted off her face, the smell of her hair burning at the sound that she made. I didn't have time to count, but there were more than I originally thought. I figured these must have been the 15 people Prudence talked about entering the flats that burned before it happened. I already knew that Natalia was one of them. Eddie and Ellie clutched Terry's shirts, trembling with fear. I wanted to help protect them, but I still couldn't help but tremble a little myself every time I caught a glimpse of those hollow voids and where their eyes were. "Hi, Terry. The kid said we could borrow some sugar?" she asked menacingly, grinning at the frightened family stood next to me. After a moment or two of intense staring, Natalia finally addressed me. She appeared to be the spokesperson for the group. "How's your friend doing? It was a shame we had to end our visit. I was enjoying her company." "Don't speak about her. She's got nothing to do with you, you sick bitch," I screamed at her. I couldn't bear looking at her face again. "You don't scare me with all your freak friends. I'm not going to let you hurt this lady or her kids." Natalia chuckled. I gulped. I may talk a good game, but I'm no hero. Mere days ago, I was just a young girl excited to move in with her boyfriend, and now here I am. My boyfriend's dead. My flat is like living in my own personal horror movie, and I'm standing up challenging demonic flame neighbors who defend demonic-looking children. But when I said she didn't scare me, I meant it. Something inside me was eradicating any fear of these people. I just want to protect these residents. Life really does throw curveballs. I know you're not scared. I saw it in your eyes when you struck that big knife in my throat. That's why we're here. My brothers and sisters are not freaks. You're the freaks. Thinking that your lives have meaning. We watch you people go about your day-to-day lives and your mundane routines, and nothing really changes. Your lives are pointless and disposable. That's why we set the fire all those years ago." She chuckled through her words. There was an animation in them, like she was a psychotic cartoon character, finally catching its prey after 138 episodes of chasing. "Those people weren't disposable," Terry mumbled, barely a decibel higher than a whisper. "What was that, Terry? Did you have something to say?" Natalia went from psychotic cartoon to school bully. She made my skin crawl. I was only a child, but those people were friends of my parents. They were good people, Terry said with slightly more confidence. None of the other people had moved. They just stood there staring. "Why would you burn people alive? What could you possibly gain?" I interjected, taking a slight step between Natalia and Terry and the kids. I could see she was getting ready to go for them, and I couldn't let it happen. We were living with the great leader Michael, all of us, living in the righteous manner that he had directed us to live. She gestured to the people around her. The name Michael appeared to inspire some sort of emotion in the group. Michael's brother Jonathan lived here, on the floor we burned. He let us hang out there sometimes, but he didn't live the righteous way that we did. He didn't like our beliefs, but he took us in when we lost the place we were straying because of the growth of the group. Him and Michael rarely saw eye to eye. They argued passionately. Our group never believed in living within the constraints of societal norms, and we were up at all hours. We came and went as we pleased, embracing freedoms and listening to music as we did introspective work. Terry shoved the kids further behind her and snapped, infuriated. "You are a group of entitled bratty hippies following some middle-aged mentally ill twat. Listen to yourself. The stereotypical cultish drivel coming out of your mouth right now," Terry cried. I was shocked at her outburst, although I couldn't have agreed more. It did sound like cultish drivel. It made me so angry that this is what an entire floor of people died over. As Terry ended her rant, the curtains hanging on the window behind her burst into flames. I jumped and felt my heart skip a beat. Don't insult us. I am sick of hearing simple-minded people call us a cult. Came from the back row. An average-looking man with dark hair and jeans had piped up, smiling and watching the curtains burn. He had done that. They were all capable of what Natalia had done to Georgia at the very least. For the first time since the people had entered Terry's flat, my nerves of steel had wavered. I realized that we were only alive because they were allowing it so far. We were in big trouble. Terry swiftly shut up, and Natalia continued her story. Michael was the true leader. Not like all the fakes you hear of in the news. The people you're talking about. He was teaching us to build a world of peace and harmony. But he didn't deny that in order to do what you had to eradicate the non-believers. He taught us to embrace the bad in us, to harness it so that we could do extraordinary things. She smiled wickedly as her hands glowed hot coals as she spoke. It may have sounded like cultish drivel, but Michael being a total faker wouldn't explain their powers. Things went wrong when someone went to the police after Michael and Jonathan had a terrible argument one night. When the police arrived, Jonathan told us to go. The group had been planning to leave the building anyway. We had nothing but interruption and trouble in the time here. This place is weird. But we had nowhere immediate to go. The police already disliked us after overcrowding the last property. We didn't need any more attention. Michael was furious. We brainstormed in a field for hours who could have done it. I personally suspected the next door neighbor, Mavis. The woman was so nosy, always knocking and asking us to keep noise down, interrupting our spiritual sessions. Michael couldn't make a certain judgment on a person who had done it. All we thought we were sure of was that they had to be someone on the same floor. So he instructed us to go back that night and eradicate the whole floor and every non-believer who lived there. As you know, we obliged. This incited sick laughter from the crowd. I waited, forcing myself to let her finish, buying time. We took pleasure in the screams, in watching every man, woman, and child go up in flames through their front door windows. It was the first time we'd unleashed all that energy, and we felt so powerful. But then, as we left the burning hallway behind us and entered the stairwell, this building found a way to fuck us over one more time. I couldn't give you a number on the amount of times we tried to run down those stairs, leave our glorious victory behind us, and return to Michael. It didn't matter how many times we tried. We couldn't make it past that floor. The stairs wouldn't let us. It didn't take long before the fire reached the stairwell we were trapped in, burning us all, along with the non-believers. We died just in time for the fire engine to arrive. We may have been dead, but we didn't disappear. We couldn't leave the building. We were just stuck wandering it, in and out of the burned flats and hallways, but not allowed anywhere else unless we were asked. It was awful. We didn't try to cause any trouble at first. We waited for Michael to come and find us, instruct us. 2 months passed and he hadn't come. Instead came confirmation. A newspaper put through the door of the building. Headline news. Tower Block resident Bernie Hemmings information vital to imprisonment of local cult leader on drug charges. I gasped. I couldn't believe I had found that when I was searching Peru. But I suppose local news wasn't so heavy online back then. Natalia saw my shocked expression and grinned wider than before. The old bat didn't tell you that then? She asked. Although it wasn't really a question. that her stupid husband is the whole reason we're here. We started to really cause issues then. Did anything within our power to fuck the whole building over. But it didn't take long for them to work out that we had to be asked to come in. We only stopped when Prue worked out a way we could die a second time, and that we would come back again. She killed 2 of our group. She was the only person that could stop us. We couldn't do shit with her around. We stopped and reached a stalemate. Then she moved out. We were going to honor that stalemate until you stabbed me. Prue's gone. It's fair game in here now. As Natalia got angrier, a member of her group started getting agitated. They all soon followed like a hive mind, working as one. The stillness became chaotic, with all of them moving and making noise. I didn't notice at first when one started walking towards Terry and the kids, but I noticed when it got near. It was a teen girl, slender and pretty, but still unsettlingly average. As she got within a meter of the family, Ellie suddenly went rigid. The claws that replaced her fingernails grew longer and sharper, with jagged edges from growing so fast. The voids deepened, if that was even possible. She opened her mouth to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Blood caked where the tooth meets the gum, where they had grown too quickly as well. Ellie jumped. She reached out towards the girl and slashed her face with the claws, leaving deep gouges across her eyes. She clung on to the girl, using her claws as wall pegs, keeping herself at eye level. Eddie controlled the crowd. His claws grew and he ran towards them, sending them scattering out the flat. Random bursts of flames erupted everywhere, lighting up the whole room. Shit had hit the fan. The 2 demon kids were successfully fending off a group of 15 dead superhuman cultists. Natalia ran from them too, but kept her eyes locked on mine as she did. As she ran from the flat, she spoke to me. "This isn't over," she screamed. And I knew that it wasn't. I stayed on Terry's sofa that night. We organized all the burned items in the house and threw things out before we crashed out in the early hours. The kids' claws retracted and they seemed to return to their earlier state, causing mischief in the hallway. They were too young to really understand. I didn't sleep much, nothing new. When I woke up, Terry was still asleep. I didn't want to disturb her, so I walked back to my flat, desperate to avoid anything strange on the way. The stairs must have noticed because they didn't skip on my way up. I didn't check the time when I left Terry's, but I reached my door at the same time as a familiar face. Postman Ian stood there, dropping letters on my doorstep. "Hey!" he shouted as he noticed me. "I need to talk. Can you come inside? Just 5 minutes, please?" I practically begged him on the doorstep. I told him everything that had happened the night before, how Natalia was out for revenge and I was the object of her rage. I begged him to tell me how to kill them, but he claimed he didn't know. He said if I kept my doors locked and didn't let them in, then I'd be fine. He looked shirty? I'm gonna imagine meant shitty, as I mentioned killing them. Didn't even suggest asking Prudence how to do it. Something was telling me there wasn't much point. He seemed so disingenuous. I wanted to trust him. So badly I wanted to trust him. I had been so vulnerable with him over Jamie. But if Prudence Hemmings could forget to mention that Bernie had done, and conveniently never pass on the method to kill these awful people, leaving them around to terrorize her friends and neighbors, then could she be a liar too? Could I really trust Ian? When he provided no answers and no real help, that something out inside me told me that I needed to get him out of my flat. I needed to rethink, start working things out on my own. I made excuses to Ian and sent him on his rounds. Prudence left me these rules, but she left so much out. How do I know I wasn't always a pawn in some sick game? Her fantasy life as a puppet master, setting me up to fail. She kept her granddaughter in a cage for years. Maybe she enjoys suffering. I wasn't going to give up easily though. Natalia wasn't going to win. I decided then and there that I need to attend the committee meeting today and start building an army against Natalia. I didn't need Prue's help or her methods. With enough manpower I could do it myself. This was war. Part 6. What time is it? We'll see how far we can get. I do actually want to finish the story because this is actually quite entertaining, I think. But it is quite long, so we might have to pick it up another time. Survival Guide, Part 6. I sat all morning thinking about everything, cup after cup of coffee in front of me to keep me awake. Once the postman had left, and I was alone with my thoughts, they just continued to get louder. I thought about Natalia and the cult, about the kids and their nighttime antics, about the committee meeting, Jamie and how much I missed him, Georgia and my burning guilt, and Mr. Prentice, who was finally making those aforementioned animal noises. Most of all, I thought about the note left for me on the move-in day, how it changed everything. My whole life was different now. I was alone, and it felt like my new home was attacking from every angle. I reread the note a few times over my coffee. I was worried about my rent. It was tight, but manageable. School is currently out and in the UK, but as a training teacher assigned to a school, I would still get paid a small amount through the summer. The rent is low, and with a second summer job, I can just about make it without Jamie. It sounds strange, but it felt nice to worry about something normal for a minute, even if I should have been worrying about my survival and the many entities currently trying to kill me. I didn't get to stew for long. I had to get ready for the committee meeting. After the events of the night before and my growing mistrust of Prudence, it was imperative that I got the neighbors on side if I was going to achieve anything like my goals of eradicating the imposter cultist neighbors. The meeting was at noon in flat 31. There was a poster on a communal notice board by the entrance that I was glad to spot. Terry hadn't mentioned the time when we met, and all our meetings since had been a bit hectic to discuss it. The poster promised tea and cakes, and my stomach rumbled at the thought. I hadn't eaten properly in days. At 11:55, I left the flat and wandered out to the corridor. I'd never seen so many neighbors. Mr. Prentice, however, was still making that awful noise, and I watched in disbelief as every single person in the corridor walked past his door as if it was silent. I did my usual deliberation on whether to take the stairs or lift, but yet again, the stairs won. I stood and couldn't bear being anywhere Jamie died, and all those extra flights were keeping me fit. Flat 31 belonged to an older lady named Molly Thompson and her husband Eric. She had a blue, rinsed head of curls attached to her head and had gone to the effort to make a homemade Battenberg cake. Ooh. Other neighbors had brought along baked goods as well. It reminded me of a school fair. The flat itself was decorated for the 70s, with plenty of china cat ornaments littered around. I sat down on a dusty plastic garden chair, one of the many that Molly seemed to have acquired it and laid out for the residents pouring in. I hadn't seen community spirit like this in my life. I smiled as I saw Terry, Eddie, and Ellie wander in. It was nice to see some of those familiar faces. I had noticed people looking at me, wondering who I was. It probably wasn't often they got new neighbors. Eddie came running up to me, swung his arms around me, and sat down in the rickety garden chair next to mine. It was so sweet. Terry smiled at me and took a seat on the other side of mine. Ellie sat next to her brother. The brown puppy dog eyes were back. No claws. "I'm glad you came," Terry said to me, loud enough to hear over the voices of the other neighbors. "I really want to see the good side of the block. We don't bite, really." She laughed nervously as she realized the irony of her statement. "Terry, I need help. We need to stop those people from coming back again, from terrorizing people. The block can't go on like this." I want to make the purpose of my attendance clear to her, and it was time for things to change. But if you don't let them in, they don't bother you. I've spoken to the kids. They know not to do it again. That those people are dangerous. She paused for a moment and sighed. Although them running away didn't help, the kids think that they're indestructible now. They've been telling me all morning that they're going to kill the bad guys. She looked so resigned. But it was true. They did run away from the twins. Maybe there was something in that. And I knew that they could die. I just had to work out how. But as the thought crossed my mind, I looked at Eddie and Ellie. I couldn't imagine taking the risk. I could have flat out gone back and asked Prudence, but to be honest, I didn't want anything to do with her. She gave me such a bad feeling. I was doubting everything she told me. It doesn't matter if you can keep them away. We can't all live in fear. Yours aren't the only kids in this building. I knew from surveying this room. But I bet not all of the kids are here as... not all of the kids here are as special as yours. What if another family burns to death because their kids were hyper one night? I could see this struck a chord with Terry. She looked at me with glassy eyes as if on the verge of tears. You're right. Molly's the chairwoman, and she can be a little strict, but you can bring it up under any other business. She spoke with a lump in her throat. Here you go, by the way. She handed me a piece of printed paper. Any other business felt a bit lackluster, but it would do, as long as it got discussed. I turned my attention to the piece of paper. It was the agenda for the meeting. For something so formal... What? For something written so formally, it appeared farcical. It seemed other flats and floors had different but equally strange issues to mine. There were only 6 items on the agenda for the meeting, with AOB, ask about anything, as the 7th. They were as follows. 1. Welcome and introductions with apologies for absence. 2. Replacing the flickering lights on floor 11. It seems to incite vicious behavior from the pets and elderly of that floor. 3. Serving a formal residence letter of concern to the man who doesn't move from the bottom of the stairwell on floor 5. 4. Finances, budgets for general maintenance and the annual barbecue. 5. The stairs with no grip leading up to floor 14. At the very top, and the health and safety hazards this presents. 6. Soundproofing of Mr. Sorry. Soundproofing Mr. Prentice's flat, number 48. I was comforted to know that I wasn't alone in dealing with all these strange occurrences. I was also chilled to the core to know for certain that this was the entire building that was more odd than I had thought. What really struck a chord as odd is when I thought about it, I had seen that man on floor 5 when going down to the stairs. But I never noticed that it had been every time, or that he had never moved until this moment. The meeting begun with a loud and dissatisfying clink. By this point, the tiny 70s themed flat was packed. Garden chairs had all ran out and people were standing. Molly Thompson stood up front from her floral pattern armchair and bashed a teaspoon against the outside of her cup. She reminded me of a very strict disciplinarian school teacher I had worked with during my university placement. She commanded quiet in the room. I think we should get started, everyone, she shrilled, her voice growing louder with every word until the crowd became to a silent hum. Right, firstly, we're not going to skip the introductions today. Apologies have been given by Joe and Steph of Flat 2, and yet again by Mr. Prentice. We have a new face in the room, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. She gestured to me, and looked in my direction, but didn't really make any eye contact. She was just talking about me as if I sat in the room. Oh, as I sat in the room. Eventually she addressed me directly. Stand up, dear. Introduce yourself. We're pleased to have you here. I was deeply uncomfortable. I could feel some sort of panic coming on. I never liked standing in crowds very much. But I stood up anyway. You're a teacher. But I stood up anyway. Hi, my name is Kat. I live in flat number 42. I moved in with my boyfriend Jamie, but he was killed in the lift by the weird rat creatures you people have living here. The people that claim to live in the burned out flats won't leave me alone, and one in particular seems to want me dead. Oh, and the window cleaner outside my flat makes me want to scoop my own eyes out with a spoon every time he knocks on the door. Nice to meet you all. The crowd had gasped a little. I sat down, instantly mortified. I don't know what had happened. The normality and the structure of the meeting overwhelmed me. There's something about a sense of order and normality amongst chaos. It does something to your brain, and for me, for the first time in this whole journey, it sent me into a meltdown. I sobbed as I hit the chair, both in pure mental exhaustion and disappointment that I had blown my own chance at building any sort of army against Natalia. Terry rubbed my shoulder. Molly broke the awkward silence that had blanketed the room. Nice to meet you, Catherine. I understand life in this building can be a little overwhelming. We did ask the previous occupant to let us intervene when you had moved in, but she was insistent. In hindsight, we may need to review our policies on new tenants. I'm so very sorry for the loss of your partner. The lift is a most unfortunate situation. She had been in positions of power in her life for certain. She responded professionally but coldly. There was no feeling to her condolences. She came off like a corrupt politician digging themselves out of a hole. She did decide to skip the introductions after my outburst. I also hate it when I'm called Catherine. My parents named me Katie, and I shortened it to Cat. Her presuming it was Catherine added to the school teacher demeanor. I carried on with proceedings swiftly, and interestingly, characters present at the meeting started to emerge. My favorite was a large middle-aged Caribbean woman named Precious St. Fleur, who would not accept Molly's claims that there was not enough in the budget to replace the lighting on floor 11. She got up and lifted her skirt to reveal a large, deep bite mark across her stomach caused by her dog after a long episode of lights flickering. When that didn't change Molly's answer, she lifted her trouser leg to reveal a smaller but still noteworthy bite mark on her leg from her elderly mother, who lives with her. Molly didn't budge. It took what felt like an eternity to get to any other business. If we weren't so focused on my goal, I would have enjoyed hearing about the quirks of other floors, maybe tried to engage a little, but I just couldn't concentrate. When the chairwoman asked if anyone had any other business, she scanned the room quickly. I stood up from my chair. She locked in on me with her eyes. My hands were shaking, and I could feel a cold sweat forming all over my body. Catherine, what can we help you with, dear? She asked in a patronizing tone. I want help in getting rid of the people pretending to be from the burned-out flats. I can't be the only person that doesn't like living in fear, I stated boldly, trying not to break down again. Dear, we've had this discussion multiple times, and it's been taken off the agenda. I'm aware that you're new here, but there's nothing we can do about certain problems within this building, and for this particular issue, we would appreciate you not letting them into your home and ignoring them like the rest of us, she snapped back. But that's not good enough. Terry's kids answered the door last night. They're children. It's easily done. What if someone else's child does it, and we aren't so lucky to survive? One burned my friend so bad a few nights ago that she's still unconscious in the hospital. This I knew from social media. Few people called out an agreement with me from the crowd. The only one who has ever been able to deal with them is Prudence. And that difficult woman never revealed her methods. Don't think we didn't try. You're suggesting a suicide mission. You do well to remember that you are a new tenant here, Molly hissed through her teeth. Did she have to mention I was new so many times? It was grating on me. Well, I'm willing, shouted Precious. She seemed stronger than the rest of her earlier rant. I was glad to have her on my side. Where she came from, a few others followed. Soon I had 5 people plus myself willing to form a subcommittee to get rid of the cultists. Molly didn't like it, but she agreed to let us do it. There was me, Precious, and Terry, along with a lady named Shanty who lived a few doors from me. A man named Anton and his friend Leo from floor 8 made up the group. To be honest, they seemed keen to get involved with any kind of battle. Leo was the loud one, Anton was mostly silent. I invited them to my flat after Molly swiftly adjourned the meeting. Inviting anyone into my home made me anxious now. I found myself studying each of their faces to ensure that they weren't too average and I hadn't invited wrong people in. I was fairly certain I hadn't. Eddie and Ellie settled in front of my TV in the bedroom so they didn't hear our conversation. They may only be kids, but I felt safer with them here. We discussed for hours how we could bring the imposter people into one place and kill them all. Leo was particularly creative. He came up with weird and wacky ways to end them, from locking them in a room and blasting with fire extinguishers until they freeze, to herding them into a lift between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m. The whole time I waited nervously for a knock on the door for them to come to us, but they didn't. We got time to plan, but despite the time, it never really took off, so no idea seemed feasible. I shared everything I knew. My conversation with Prue the night before in Terry's flat, everything. Precious listened to my tales intently before speaking. Derek would have helped us. He was a great man. He used to turn up at my door in the dead of night just as those lights started to take my dog for a walk. She spoke of the gardener in fondness. Prudence told me about Derek. She said he's been gone since the garden was demolished. I replied flatly. It was awful when he left. That woman that used to live here was so nasty to him. I watched out of my window as she tore up the garden. I know she was grieving for that little girl, but I know Derek only ever wanted to help. Shanty spoke up from the corner. She had been pretty quiet the whole time. He was the whole reason we didn't have those awful creatures from the lift all over our homes anymore. My brother was killed by one before the agreement. He was 4 years old. I twitched as she told her story. Shanty had such sad eyes, and speaking about her brother only filled them further with sadness. This is another thing I don't understand. Why have any agreement if you managed to kill most of them? Why not all? I asked, feeling anger over Jamie burn through my throat as I spoke. Precious laughed. Terry shot her a look from across the room. No one's told you the whole story, have they? Shanty asked, a single tear running down her face. What do you mean? This was driving me insane. Nothing was simple. How could I trust anyone? When Prudence and some of the others killed the creatures, they killed a large group of them in one hit. They had stated to work out that the food scraps and pet food were attracting them, and they gathered all the pet food in the tower block into one empty flat on the floor that the fire had happened. The creatures came in droves, just like expected, and they set the flat alight. Again. The flat was burned to ash on top of pre-existing ash. Nothing could survive that. Shanty was interrupted after this by Leo. And then 3 giant rat motherfuckers literally rose from the ashes, triple as smart and strong and fucked up, he said, a look of excitement on his face. Shanty rolled her eyes and continued. So all Prudence did was cause, quite literally, a bigger problem. She didn't kill them. All she did was help them evolve. There's only 3 of them, but they learned to sneak attack. More people died than during the original infestation. They were more intelligent, but not in the way that it comes across when the agreement's spoken about. We couldn't speak or reason with them. Terry was looking at the floor. Only Derek was able to do that. He spoke to them like he spoke to the garden. He made it safe for everyone again. I wasn't there. I was too young, but we were told he didn't even have to use words. They understood just a series of movements and eye contact. Derek explained the rule with the lift. He told us it was a gesture of goodwill. The creatures needed a home and seemed attracted to the building, and we would let them live there and stop killing their kind if they would stop killing ours. But to show them respect, we would allow them a small time frame where unleash their instinctual nature. But only if someone came to them. There are only 2 now. Prudence killed the other during what happened with her granddaughter, but that only made them 2 stronger. Like they absorbed the 3rd. I tried to take in all the information I was receiving, but I couldn't. It was too much. Derek isn't coming back. It's been years. This is pointless, Terry finally interrupted. Precious laughed again. How do you know? You speak to dear old Prue all the time. Something we don't? No, something we don't, Precious spoke, sarcastically, but I think she meant what she said. It is becoming clear that Prudence Hemmings wasn't too popular in this building. I don't speak to her all the time. We just keep in contact. She was always nice to me. Terry tried weakly to defend herself. That's because you're naive and a pushover. She used you because no one else would give her the time of day. Precious was about to launch into a full rant on Terry. I was glad Eddie and Ellie were in the other room and couldn't hear. I wondered if she'd seen them at night. I decided to stop the rant. This was becoming counterproductive and we were getting nowhere with our plans. I interjected and told them I needed them to leave so that I could sleep. Partly true, although I know I couldn't sleep. I had other things to do. They all filed out of my flat. Terry and the kids were the last to leave. She gave me a hug, and as she left, she told me to get a proper night's rest, telling me she was always there for a cuppa and a chat. It was sweet. I felt sorry for Terry. The kids hugged me too as they left. I know she spoke to Prue, and I was certain that it was really entirely innocent. I sat in the empty flat, disheartened but that my assembling of an army had turned into bickering shit show with no real suggestions on how to kill the imposter neighbors. I felt totally alone. I couldn't trust Prue or Ian or pretty much anything I thought I knew. Maybe Prue didn't even kill those neighbors. They only told me half-truths about the creatures after all. I was left alone with my thoughts again, and after a few hours, a good one finally struck me, but I needed supplies. I left the building and went to the nearest shop to gather the items I needed. For what I needed in the time of night, I had to travel to a 24-hour supermarket. It took half an hour each way on the bus, but I stayed focused. The bags were heavy and awkward, and on the way back to the block... but if it paid off, this was going to be worth it. I trudged up the stairs. It took me 2 trips and 24 flights of stairs instead of 14 to get everything in my flat and organize myself. It only took 16 in a large gym bag, but it was easier to carry on the way back down, thankfully. I passed the man on the floor 5 twice. Now I'd notice him. He made my skin crawl a little. I walked through the downstairs corridor, diverting away from the main entrance and passing all the ground floor flats to the doors at the back of the building. The door at the back led to a small concrete area with a grass strip along the side of a bench decorated with a memorial plaque. This was the block's outside space. As is typical in the city, the whole bench was covered in graffiti. The memorial was unreadable. I got to work. I dug up the strip of grass, turning soil with my new equipment. I had never been green-fingered, and, to be honest, the shrubs I had bought had been so heavy, I had grown to resent them a little. I worked for an hour and a half. I was sweating, and night had come. It was pitch black, and I was using my phone torch to see. I'd almost given up until I got up from my crouching position to stretch my knees. I reached my arms out, put down my shovel, and took a seat on the bench. I hadn't seen him arrive, but the man was already sat there. He wore a flat cap and a jacket, despite it being the middle of summer and a beautiful night. He just smiled warmly at the shrubs for a moment without a word. Eventually he spoke. I've missed this place. The name's Derek. Part 7 looks like Eat is the final. We're almost there. Part 7. This is quite long. Some people are too good for this world. I sat in silence for a moment, in shock that my plan had even worked. It seemed almost too simple, too easy, but here he was. Derek had a kindly face. Wrinkles around his eyes and cheeks only added to the softness of his expression. His white hair poking out from beneath his flat cap stood out in the dark night. It's a lovely little patch you've planted. I can look after it if you like. I used to maintain the last garden here, he said, breaking the silence that followed since his initial words. I know who you are. We need you. was all I could manage. The mental exhaustion and fatigue from the whole experience had built up, but his arrival was like finishing a bad day working at a school. I felt like I could relax again, even if only a little. "What's your name, darling?" he asked. "It's Kat. I live in flat 42 now." His face lit up as I confirmed my flat number. "Prudence is gone?" he asked. "She's gone, but the whole place is a mess. So many things are happening and the residents are suffering," I answered. We chatted for what felt like hours, outside with nothing but moonlight. He told me how he used to consider the building part of the garden, a place for him to maintain the residents just like the plants he looks after. I explained my whole experience since moving in. I told him about Jamie and I sobbed. Derek held me as I cried and made me feel safe, something I had forgotten the feeling of since receiving Prue's note. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. I told him about Natalia and the cultists, the problems that they had been causing. He was particularly heartbroken when he heard that they had used Eddie and Ellie for entry. He had gone before they were born, but remembered Terry as a child and how sweet she was. He was pleased when I told her what a sweet adult she had become. My claims that Prudence was the only person who knew how to kill the imposter neighbors were met with a skeptical expression, which gave me some hope. Derek listened to my entire tale with barely a word. When I finished, he stood up and asked me to follow him. I was confused, but I did as I was told. He walked me to the entrance of the lift. I lifted my arm to check the time on my watch. We had been outside for quite some time, and the idea of the creatures being inside made my heart pound and my stomach turn. "You're safe. It's 12:32 a.m. There's no need to worry or to check your watch." And with that, he pressed the call lift button. Despite his insistence that I was safe, my stomach continued to do gymnastics. It felt like forever before the lift finally made a clunking sound that meant it had reached the bottom. I felt my whole body shaking violently as the doors opened. I don't know what I expected to see. We were in the safe time zone, but every time I looked at the lift, I pictured Jamie's dead, crunched up body. "Step inside," he said. "I can't. Please, don't make me," I begged. "I won't let anything happen to you. But you need to see something." There was such sincerity in his eyes as he spoke. I had never trusted anyone so completely, so quickly, but every fiber of my being told me that this man was entirely good. I stepped inside the lift. Derek stepped in behind me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder as I hyperventilated. He gently turned me to face the panel of buttons that controlled where the lift stops. "What's wrong with the panel? Do you see it?" he asked cryptically. I studied the panel, read all the numbers, counting them. I couldn't see anything wrong. I really tried, but nothing seemed out of place at all. Everything you expected to find was there, and nothing more. I shook my head, barely regaining my composure. "Can you take us to floor 9, please?" He smiled slightly as he made the request. I looked back to the panel and pressed the button, but floor 9 didn't exist. I was so confused. I counted the numbers. I was sure of it. Derek must have made it disappear, but the panel didn't look any different to before. I can't explain it, looking at it. I would have sworn blind nothing was wrong with it even once I knew, but floor 9 didn't exist. Derek could see my frustration. It was like the building was now playing tricks on me. He walked me out of the lift and sat down on the bottom of the stairs before he finally began to speak. "The building is like a living organism. It can seal off parts of the world, and it can open up others you never could have imagined. When those awful people burned that whole floor of residence, I was devastated. Some wonderful people lived on those flats, both of the usual and unusual variety. But those people had no limit to their cruelty. Whole families burned alive. It was a tragedy that made me so angry. I felt so guilty when it happened. I can predict what some of our more tricky residents are going to do and make sure that I'm there to help. But those people were nothing to do with this place. I couldn't see what they were planning, so I couldn't stop it." At this point, I'd noticed one of the hairless cats had sat between us. Derek looked at it with tears brimming in his eyes. He stroked it and moved it onto his lap. Derek's fingers didn't burn at all. He continued. When it happened, the building used its defense mechanisms and sealed off the entirety of the floor. It stopped the fire from spreading and kept the perpetrators there to die by their own hands. The building only allowed the floor to be unsealed once they were dead. It took about a week before those awful people turned up again, asking for sugar at people's doors. The first few let them in. It was so difficult. So many residents burned alive that I was having to use the remains from my garden just to hide the dead. The entire community were terrified and grieving for those that died. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't predict them or see them. So I took Prudence, who at the time seemed like a perfectly reasonable woman, to the burned out floor. Floor 9, however, had been sealed again. There was no button in the lift and it always skipped down the stairs. No one had noticed. This building really is a magnificent creature. I stared at him in amazement. Through the story, I was exhausted, but my brain was working in overdrive to process what he was telling me. I had started to stroke the cat too. My fingers did burn, but I didn't flinch. I found its company comforting. He carried on. I went back later that night and took the stairs again, alone this time. I think my intentions were clear, and the stairs allowed me access to floor 9 for the first time since just after the fire. I brought Prudence to the floor within the hour. The stairs had stopped skipping floor 9 for me, although I later learned that when Prudence had tried alone, she was not allowed access. We explored the floor, walking amongst the remnants of our dead friends' belongings. Eventually we came across one of the soulless arsonists roaming the hall. It appears that that's where they spend their time when they aren't terrorizing the residents trying to claim more victims. He was disturbed and disoriented to see anyone not like them on that floor. He twitched a little and spat out the sugar line as if it was automatic response. I almost felt sorry for him. He claimed to come from flat 66. More were approaching behind him. Prudence was terrified. She was starting to sweat profusely and back away from the man, but it didn't cool her down. He was burning her slowly. I felt nothing. See, the stranger things in life don't seem to affect me. I've never known why. Sometimes I even know just how to deal with them, like it's programmed into me. On this new playing field, in their domain, I knew what to do. I grabbed the man and ran him down to flat 66, 4 doors from where we were standing. I threw him into the flat and waited. The other arsonists were approaching. The man tried to exit the flat that was doorless after the wooden doors all burned to cinders in the fire. But as he reached the door, something stopped him. He couldn't leave, no matter how hard he tried or how much he screamed. Prudence lit up. She grabbed hold of one that had tried to kill her friend Molly. She remembered the flat numbers she had claimed to be from and repeated my actions, with a lot more sweating and some winces of pain. It worked again. Prudence wanted to go after the rest, but as I got closer, I could see the blisters forming on parts of her body. I dragged her out of the hallway and back into the stairwell. We ran. She begged me to take her back, kept telling me that the stairs wouldn't let her, that it was too dangerous. The residents had started to learn not to let them in, and we had no casualties at all after we trapped the first 2. Don't get me wrong, it's a problem I was intending to deal with, but it was around the time that we first learned the council would be building that monstrosity over the top of my garden. He gestured to the window that showed some of the neighboring tower block. This left me not at my best. My intuition was failing me when a few months after that I allowed Prudence and Molly to herd the creatures from the lift to floor 9. It was one of my biggest regrets. I should have never walked them up there, but I didn't know she was going to burn them all. She didn't give me a chance to reason. I became mistrusting of everyone and distracted. Not long after, I went away for a long while, so I guess the arsonists remained, and now they're threatening you. Tomorrow I will go. I will fix the mess I left behind. I'm so sorry that's affected you so badly. I'd love to meet these twins. They sound incredibly brave. They are, I finally interrupted. And I want to be there tomorrow. I want to lock Natalia away for good. I can't allow it. You'll be attacked. He cut me off entirely. I let it drop instantly, but in the back of my mind, I knew I would be there, no matter what. I went to sleep that night with my mind reeling. I wondered where Derek slept, and if he even needed to. The next morning, I left my flat early, past the man on floor 5, and sat and waited on the steps at floor 8. I tested it, of course, and just like I anticipated, ascended any higher, it took me straight to floor 10, or 11, depending on if you had to skip. So I returned to floor 8 and waited. Derek hadn't indicated what time he was coming, but I was ready. I would wait all day and night if I had to. But luckily I didn't. Derek was climbing the stairs around 11 a.m. I'd already been there for 3 hours, but it was worth it. He looked particularly unimpressed to see me. His face still looked kind though, even with this sour expression. I can't stop you, can I? He said, sounding resigned in his tone. Not for anything. You have to promise to stay back. If you get your girl approaches you, you can do what you need to, but you have to stay back, he pleaded. I nodded and stood up. We ascended the stairs, and for the very first time in my life, I saw the big plastic sign saying 9. The floor that didn't exist. As we pushed through the door, it was like entering an entirely new world. Everything was black, burned to carbon. You could smell nothing but charcoal. Literally nothing but empty shells of homes and flakes of what used to be sentimental objects remained. It was devastating to witness. If you've ever visited a mass grave site, you'll understand partly how I was feeling. It was sickening to think of all the lives needlessly lost. But I didn't get time to think. Natalia walked towards me, flying down the hallway. How the fuck did you get here? She screamed. Her eyes were wide and angry. I started to feel hotter already. Derek grabbed my arm and pulled me next to him, making sure to keep a tight hold of my arm. Where do you live? Derek asked her. I started to back away as the sweat drops from my brow. I desperately wanted to shout out the number, but I couldn't. I was so hot, I wasn't functioning properly. Everything became so overwhelming I couldn't remember what Georgia had said, what flat Natalia had claimed to come from. I'm not that stupid. I saw what happened to them. She gestured over her shoulder to what must have been flat 66, where a man laid on the floor, breathing out but looking broken. Just existing in that room. Prudence had been creative with the truth yet again. She didn't kill them. You can't kill them. What had Georgia said? I racked my brains as I felt the skin on my face starting to sting. I imagined her melting away. It was happening to me. I was next. And then as my hair started to singe at the ends, it came to me. 71! I screamed as loud as I could. I could barely see Derek grabbing her, but it ran towards me with her. I was clawing at his eyes and face, screaming at him to let go, but he didn't burn. He just kept hold of her. When he approached 71, he beckoned me over. You do it. Then get off the floor, his blunt but reasonable. He was blunt but reasonable, and I complied. I pushed hard. There was nothing but anger in her eyes. She pushed my face hard with her hand, and as I got her to cross the boundary into flat 71, I felt my skin sizzle and blister. My whole face was in agony, but I couldn't stop pushing. Watching Natalia try to fight her way out of a door that didn't exist was both satisfying and humorous. The others had started to approach at the sound of the commotion. I lingered, hoping to watch her suffer, but Derek shot me one look and I knew. It was time to go. I ran out the corridor and back into the stairwell. I stopped for longer than I probably should have, but I knew I might not get to see that 9 again, and it would be worth it. I waited for Derek on floor 9's stairwell. I couldn't help but imagine the cultist burning to death the first time around. I could hear angry screams faintly from inside the corridor. They made me worry about Derek, but I knew that really I didn't need to. It took a while, but he eventually left the corridor and joined me in the stairwell. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and and the third-degree burns across my face. He didn't need to speak. I knew he'd fix the problem. We walked silently back down the stairs towards my flat. I looked back at the floor 9, knowing the building would sailed off for good. It took a few floors to reach floor 7, and I invited Derek in for a cup of tea. He rejected it, saying he wanted to go visit some old friends. Despite my injuries, I couldn't help but smile. Something I'd done was going to help those residents. I stood at my door and watched Derek walk away, pleased that there was some true good in this building. After a few steps down the hallway, Derek started to fade, almost like a CGI ghost in a movie. Every step he became more transparent. I felt my stomach turn again, like it had outside the lift. I ran out to follow him. I called after him, but by the time I had reached where he had been, he was gone. I walked the entire corridor to the window at the back. I looked out the window into a small concrete heavy garden and hoped to see him sat on the memorial bench. I didn't see him. Instead, I saw Prudence, hacking at my tiny planted patch with shears. Part 8. When I saw her out the window, garden shears being gripped by both hands and a maniacal expression on her face, I just stood still. I was frozen to the spot in shock. I felt no pain at all from the burn on my face. Everything was numb. The relief of eradicating the imposter neighbors and the joy at finding a friend in Derek was hacked away in an instant, just like every leaf from my shrubs. Why would she do this? What had I ever done to her? Every question possible crossed my mind. I feel like the frustration bubbling inside me. Everything about this place just threw up question after question, and for every answer I got, there were 10 new questions waiting to be asked. At that moment in time, though, only one was truly important. How did Prudence know? I thought about Terry and her telephone conversations. I didn't want to think that the sweet lady I thought Terry had turned out to be would do that, but it did cross my mind. I thought of Ian, the postman. I had bad vibes from him for a while. Maybe he'd seen Derek coming up the stairs while on his rounds that morning. I stood there frozen, pondering all these things, until I saw Prudence collapse into the memorial bench sobbing, head in her hands. She was surrounded by the remains of my attempt at a garden, with the shears laid out in the floor. The stairs were kind to me on the way down. It took 4 flights to make it to the bottom. I ran down the corridor and out the back entrance of the block. No idea what I was going to say. Prudence was all I could manage. Nice one, Cat. She sat bolt upright before turning and standing quicker than I thought it possible for an old lady. You evil, stupid little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? She screamed. So much animation in her face that the spaces between her wrinkles pulsated like veins on an angry weightlifter. Me? You think I'm evil? You left that shitty note hidden, missing everything I need to know, and got my boyfriend killed. And what do you think you're doing to your own? I screamed, tears beginning to roll before she interrupted me. Don't you dare talk about her. Her voice cracked and she broke down again, this time falling to her knees, twigs and leaves sticking to the bottom of her dress. I didn't know what else to do, so I sat down on the floor. I knew that it was probably a bad idea. This woman couldn't be trusted, and I hadn't forgotten that. But seeing an old lady crying on the cement floor still made me feel awful. How did you know about the garden? I asked calmly, trying to change my approach. She shoved a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. She didn't look at me. Her eyes remained on the floor. Dear Prudence, I couldn't exist knowing what I'd done. I should never have told you about it. The last 2 won't grow stronger. She was never theirs to begin with. But I have to end her suffering. I'm sorry, signed Derek. I knew what he had done as soon as I finished the note. Lila, or what was left of her, was gone for good. Of all the creatures, only Jamie's killers from the lift remained. That's how Derek had spent the few hours I'd slept between our encounters. This is all your fault, she sniffled. My whole family is gone because of you. That hurt a lot. I trembled as I tried to speak, but I always really hated confrontation, and I could feel myself starting to glitch. How can you say that? Hello, welcome. I saw her, and she was trapped in a tiny cage eating dog food and small animals. Your family died in that lift, just like my Jamie. I may have struggled to get the words out, but I wasn't able to let Prudence Hemmings blame me for her decisions. Lila was better off dead than what she was, however awful that may sound. What happened to your face? Prudence growled at me. Take you to visit floor number 9? He did this to her in the first place, not me. And now he's disfigured you too. She was spinning things. I could feel throbbing as she mentioned my face. I really should have had medical attention. This isn't his fault. You messed him up, and he did that to her because of you. You told me that yourself. I tried ferociously to defend Derek, but something inside me still felt uncomfortable about what he had done. I couldn't help it. Lila was an innocent little girl who shouldn't have been punished for Prue's mistakes. This whole thing was such a mess. I was grieving. And then I had her back for all those years. And then I lost Bernie, and then my home, and now I have to grieve for her all over again. Prudence continued to cry, but softer. I looked around at the chaos she created and up at the block my boyfriend had died in, and rolled my eyes in disbelief that she could be so selfish. She continued, Let me tell you about Lila. She was a beautiful little girl. As I mentioned, I have 2 other children. They have had many other grandchildren. However, I haven't spoken to my oldest 2 in years, even before what happened with Lila. That was my first opportunity to get to know one of my grandchildren. Bernie adored her too, always reading stories and sneaking her sweets. I begged my son to allow her to stay. My children were all incredibly ungrateful, and they had it easy growing up and still resented me. I gave them a good, strict upbringing, but they didn't appreciate it. They said I was a cruel mother. Lila's dad was the only one I spoke to, but our relationship still wasn't that of a typical loving mother and son. But she was a second chance. It was a miracle when he agreed. I was more shocked that he had convinced his wife to allow it. That awful harlot of a woman never liked me, although I didn't like her either. They refused to speak to me after everything. I haven't heard from them since. They had more grandchildren I'll never meet. I knew it at the time. My relationships with any of my children were over for good, so when Derek gave me a solution, I took it. I wasn't entirely truthful when we first spoke. I said I hadn't wanted this, but I was desperate. There was never a way to bring her back safely. Derek explained what she would become to me. He was initially trying to put me off, even trying to get her back. I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. But I couldn't pass up the idea of my beautiful little Lila needing her grandma forever. I suppose I was too ashamed to admit it before, but why should I be ashamed? My altercation with Derek happened after she was back, and when he tried to kill her the first time, spouting the same things on that note. What kind of a monster wants to kill a little girl? That's why I trashed the garden. He said he wasn't coping with the news of the new block when he suggested it, that he shouldn't have told me it was even possible that she had to die. I hid her until the bulldozers came in. When he disappeared, I thought I was safe to spend the rest of my life with her. Bernie hated me. Spending time with Lila was all I lived for. I grew to love her how she was. I felt sick. Listening to Prudence talk brought up so many repressed feelings about Jamie. I hadn't had time to grieve or process anything. I missed him terribly. My old life and my old future felt a million miles away. I was relieved to know that Derek hadn't tricked Prudence or even intended to create Rat Lila. He was truly good. But she didn't get to have a life. You lived for her, but she wasn't really living. How could a sane person do that to their own flesh and blood? I retorted. You have no idea. This place can make you do irrational things, but she had a life. She had me, that's all she needed. She was certainly right about the building being irrational, about the building and irrational actions. The pain intensifying on my face throbbed in agreement. But I was still convinced that she had lost it Dr. Frankenstein style, where Rat Lila was concerned. She had stopped crying. Her rage levels were rising again. I tried to tell her that it wasn't really the child she had known, but she seemed to have grown an entirely new attachment to the creature that replaced what she lost. Every rational argument I gave was met with increasing levels of screaming. She got less coherent as she went on. The argument was going nowhere. We went back and forth for what felt like forever. After a while, she started to get closer to me. We had both stood up by this point, and despite her haggard and frail appearance, Prudence was truly fighting. She looked unhinged. Her words were no longer going in, as I was overwhelmed and had too many thoughts rushing in through my mind to process her ranting. I took a few steps back, clearing a small distance between us. By this point, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the neighbors and windows of the block watching the altercation outside. Prue's screaming had brought a lot of attention. It was bright and I couldn't see well, but I turned to scan the windows and did recognize Eddie and Ellie watching from their bedroom, trying to wave at me. They frantically waved and pointed. I tried waving back and gesturing to them, but they kept pointing at me. Why were they pointing? Then I heard it, the garden shears scraping the ground as Prudence picked them up and charged towards me. You ignorant little bitch. You aren't even listening. You don't deserve my home. You killed her. The twins had been telling me to turn around. I shouldn't have taken my eyes off her. Luckily, unlike my earlier shock when I had first seen her, I didn't freeze. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in and I ran faster than I have ever before. I burst back into the building and heard neighbors on the bottom floor lock their doors in a symphony of bolts clacking. I couldn't blame them. Prudence wasn't far behind me and I wouldn't want to take her in on her current state if given a choice. But it didn't stop me pounding on their doors begging someone to call the police, although something told me that in this building, that wasn't going to happen. I ran up the stairs, still being followed by her. By the second floor, most were still locked, but a few had come out of their homes, armed with a variety of heavy objects. Even in a crisis, I couldn't fault the community spirit here. I ran another flight of stairs that became 2, but still led me to floor 3, and then to the back of the corridor. I pounded on Terry's door. My heart was racing, but when I turned, Prue was nowhere to be seen. I was hoping the people who came out on floor 2 had stopped her, but something was odd. I hadn't heard any commotion. This wasn't the end of it. Eddie and Ellie hugged me tight as Terry let me in and bolted the door shut quickly behind me. I told her about what happened. She couldn't believe what Prue had done. Have a good night. It turned out no one knew about Lila. I was edgy for the first hour, but Prue had disappeared. Terry helped clean up my burn and put some cold compress on it. She offered to take me to the hospital, but I couldn't. I was too shaken up from what had happened. I couldn't face trying to explain how I sustained my injuries, and I still hadn't reported Jamie missing. He still hadn't had any messages from his family, and work had given up calling, but his friends had started. They were harassing me nonstop, but I had been too distracted to come up with a decent lie. It had been a week since I moved in, and it wouldn't be long until people realized something was seriously wrong. My conversations with my family had been short, with me insisting that they didn't visit until we were, quote, unpacked and set up. On top of a murderous old lady and an untold amount of abnormal issues, the real-world problems were starting to creep up on me. Oh, thank you. I sat with Terry for hours, drinking tea and chatting to her. It started to get dark, and Ellie and Eddie came into the living room after playing in their room for a while. The voids replaced the big brown puppy dog eyes again, and their claws looked especially sharp. but to me, they were still adorable. Their transformation prompted me to head back to my flat. It was late. I needed to work out what to do next, and how to dig myself out of this giant hole. I couldn't just keep planting gardens. I needed to do this myself. I wandered up the stairs. They went on for a while, but nothing too horrific. I passed the man on floor 5, nodding politely and continuing my ascent. I wondered if he'd received the letter of the concern yet. He was a little unsettling. When I got to my floor, Mr. Prentice was making his animal noises again. I smiled, which hurt my face. After all the madness, I was starting to find the seemingly benign horrors of the building oddly comforting. I reached my flat and turned the key in the door before bolting myself in like Terry had. I could feel something wasn't right the moment I entered. The flat was in chaos, which was nothing new because we had only moved in a week ago, and I had been too preoccupied to unpack, but things were out of place. The organized chaos wasn't how I left it. Then she strolled out of my kitchen. Prudence Hemmings. She was carrying a large carving knife in her left hand this time. She had prepared for her attack. She smiled at me and lifted her right hand, jingling a set of keys that she had entered with. I turned to unbolt the door, but she grabbed me from behind before I could turn the handle to open it and held the knife to my throat. "I will kill you for what you've done," she whispered into my ear. Without a second thought, I leaned forward just a tad and swung my head back as hard as I could. I couldn't believe that it worked, but I must have broken her nose. Prudence dropped the knife and clutched her face, blood streaming between her fingers. I went to grab the knife, but she was closer, doing the same thing. I had no other option but to run again. I grabbed the door handle and turned it to exit the flat as she tried to stab me. I was mostly at the door, but her arm was close enough to reach my side, and I felt the knife pierce the side of my torso. I was in searing pain, but I didn't stop running. As I stepped outside my flat, I could still hear Mr. Prentice's noises flooding the entire hallway. It gave me an idea. I ran towards his door, Prudence stabbing at me frantically with blood gushing from her nose. A few got me as I stopped outside flat 48. The pain was awful, and I could feel myself starting to drift out of consciousness when I was losing a lot of blood. I would give my last breath to end Prue, so running on nothing but adrenaline, I knocked hard on flat 48 and shouted, "Mr. Prentice, can you help me?" It was a shot in the dark. I didn't know what would happen, but I had to try something. She had stopped stabbing me. She was enjoying watching me bleed out slowly from the wound she had already inflicted. I was incredibly weak, and I lost consciousness not long after, but before I did, I heard heavy clucking from the inside of flat 48, chain locks being released and bolts being undone. I watched with blurry vision as a large creature that I can only describe as a cross between a bull and a wolf charged out of the flat, trampled the old witch to her death. I heard bones crunch just as I slipped away. I woke up in the hospital a day later. My parents were there, as well as the police. Apparently, I'd been found just outside the tower block, with my handbag missing, by a neighbor who had been watching from a window as it happened. The police told me that the person had seen the mugging out of the window. They had seen 2 men approach me and Jamie, splash something in my face, attack us, and when we tried to fight back, they bundled my boyfriend into the car, which the police had been searching for to no avail. He was officially missing. I was baffled but grateful that Jamie's disappearance wouldn't be blamed on me. I went along with it and made out that he had ghosted work to enjoy our first week of living together. I've been stabbed 4 times, but thankfully in all the right places, if there is such a thing as the right place to be stabbed. I lost a lot of blood, but I was going to be fine. They were all shallow. They assumed my burns were chemical and happened during the mugging too. The police promised to keep us updated, but they still can't find the car. They never will. I wish the story of the police had told were true. It left some hope for Jamie. My parents weren't too keen on me returning to the flat after what happened. They said the area was too rough, and I was living proof that it wasn't safe. They offered to collect my stuff for me. I insisted, though. Told them that I wanted to see how I felt, and they couldn't force me not to. I was released from the hospital 2 days after I woke up in there. When I arrived at the flats, it was strange. It felt like home. Despite everything, something about this place drew me to it. I took the lift for the first time since Jamie had died. I had to. I wasn't recovered enough to conquer too many stairs just yet, and I couldn't guarantee that they'd be kind to me. I smiled at the lack of a button 9 and winced at the thought of the creatures. As I reached my corridor, I saw Mr. Prentice walking along with his newspaper and milk in a bag. He turned to me and smiled. I wasn't sure you'd come back. It was nice to see you. See, you're up and walking. He made small talk as if I hadn't seen him literally trample a woman to death a couple days prior. The whole experience had been so disorienting that I started to wonder if I really had been mugged and had dreamed the note and everything that's happened since. Then he said something that confirmed everything was real. I never liked that woman. But you've got a real friend in the lady downstairs. He winked at me and turned the key on his door. I got into mine and sat down on the second-hand sofa. I felt empty, but relieved. With Prue and the imposter neighbors all gone, the only threat left was the creatures in the lift, who were only a threat between 1:11 and 3:33 a.m. Maybe I could start to live in a semi-peaceful life in this place. Terry knocked on the door, my handbag that I had left at hers before Prue attacked me in my flat, on her arm. Mr. Prentice was right. She was a good friend. I thanked her for what she had done and for what she had told the police. She said it was pure luck that she found me. She had been walking up to return the bag and found me and Prue sprawled out on the floor. I asked what happened to Prue's body and she just pointed in the direction of flat 48. He was eating it, she said. It's been a few days and I've decided to stay. I can't imagine going back to complete normality after everything I've been through, and I've grown quite attached to some of the building quirks. I tried replanting the garden with the help of the twins. I ripped a few stitches doing it and Derek never came. I think he's gone for good. I'm ready to fully embrace life here. The last few days have been hard, but there's some time to breathe. Along the time to breathe came the time to grieve, and I've been grieving badly for Jamie. This leads me to the last thing I have to tell you. Last night, I laid in bed, plagued with the thoughts of Prue and everything that had happened. But what I couldn't get to leave my mind was how much happiness it brought her to have Lila back. It infected every part of my thoughts. I know you warned me not to, but I did it. I repeated the ritual. I haven't caught him yet, but I've heard the scratching. Jamie is back. I think we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna leave it off at part 9. Oh, my goodness, this is quite the long story. I hope you all have enjoyed. I'm sorry that we have to leave on a cliffhanger, but we will pick it up next month. If you want an official date for that one, that would be September 29. We do it every final Sunday of the month. So, unfortunately, no one is online, so I will just call it here. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you had a fun time, an interesting time. I have grown to really enjoy doing these readings for you, for my lovely chat appreciators. And I hope that you've been enjoying them as well. Like I said, we'll pick up the rest of the story next time. So I'm just going to have to remember that we are at part 9. But I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow, probably with the Kai and Friends collab. If not, I might start picking up a new game. Since we have more or less finished Paper Mario. I don't know what game yet though, so that will be in to be determined territory, but once I do figure that out, I will let people know. Until then, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Stay safe, stay hydrated, do some better research about living in an apartment with your significant other, and have a good rest of your day. Bye bye.